Awesome.
Have you?
Thank you all for coming today. I think we're going to get rolling here so we can see where the day takes us. So good afternoon and welcome. My name is Sean Lofton. I'm the Artist Services Coordinator here at Northern Play Center. I would like to thank you all for joining us in person and online as we direct our attention and energy to the recognition and celebration of NCC's 2023 recipients of the McKnight Artist Fellowships for Ceramic Artists. Before we go any further with today's activities, I would like to take a moment to pause and respectfully acknowledge that Northern Play Center is located on Dakota land. This afternoon, we are here to celebrate and support NCC's 2023 McKnight Ceramic Artist Fellows. This grant opportunity is awarded on an annual basis to provide two Minnesota-based mid-career ceramic artists with a generous award to acknowledge their accomplishments in the field, while providing additional support to continue their growth and professional development. Additionally, our fellows' work will be featured in a McKnight Artist exhibition that starts at NCC and will travel to numerous sites across the state of Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Since 1997, Northern Play Center has been a steward of these fellowships and related residency opportunities. Come on in, y'all. They're made possible by the McKnight Foundation. These grants enrich the lives and careers of both the recipients and our community through lectures, workshops, exhibitions, and the connections established through the process. I would like to thank the McKnight Foundation for supporting these programs and for the incredible impact that they bring to both the ceramic arts and the greater arts community of Minnesota. Before introducing our first artist today, I would like to note that this presentation is being hosted and recorded on Zoom. For those of you who are connected through Zoom, please remember to turn off your camera and mute your microphones as this is being recorded. If you have any questions, please enter those into the chat, and the staff member will be happy to ask those for you at the appropriate time. Additionally, should you lose your connection during today's presentation, these talks and demonstrations will be edited and posted on NCC's YouTube channel for you to review. Now, getting everything started, as our first presenter of the day, I would like to introduce Chotsani Elaine Dean.
I'm not paying you for that one.
I'm gonna add it. Keep it rolling. Chotsani is an artist and assistant professor of ceramics at the University of Minnesota. Born in Hartford, Connecticut, Chotsani received her BFA in ceramics from Hartford Art School and a Master's of Fine Art from the Sam School of Art at Washington University in St. Louis. Dean has been the recipient of a variety of awards and residencies, along with holding teaching positions at a variety of institutions around the country. In addition, Chotsani has exhibited her work both nationally and internationally. And now, without any further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to Chotsani. I'm going to get polite.
Thank you, Sean.
My pleasure.
I have a timer, so I stay on track. So if you see me pop my phone open, it's because it went down. That's my title screen, Cultivating an Idea and Germinating a Seed. That's an image that I took of me holding a tea leaf in Assam, India in 2013. In the last half of my Fulbright grant research time. I had a teaching and research grant, and I was based in Varanasi, India. And towards the end of my time, it took that time to arrange and plan to spend time on tea plantations in India. So that'll be a theme that sort of runs through here. And I have a video, and hopefully it works, that we can watch that reflects my time there and also gives context to some of the works you'll see in the presentation. You said it freezes. What? Wait, am I pushing the right one?
Yeah, click to the next slide on there. It might just
space bar.
jump in. Just use the
Oh, actually use the mouse.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
it might sometimes just need to click. Yep.
Okay. So this is an image of my mother and myself when I was little. This was one of the first times I went to the U.S. Botanical Gardens in Washington, D.C. And this photo was taken by my father, who is from Washington, D.C. So I grew up going there every summer and spending time on the National Mall and especially the Botanical Gardens. So in my work, you'll obviously see this is just this little girl trying to get back to those first experiences of being completely blown away by being in a space where you could feel like you were moving all around different parts of the world and learning all kinds of things just through plants. And so you'll see how that's emerged and cultivated in my work. And this is an important book for me. And I also will be reading from this during my demonstration. I don't have a very dynamic creative practice. So I decided now the way I want to move forward is expanding on what informs my work. So I'm not really so much of a technical person, but there are things that inform my work that actually develop technical processes in my work. And I think that's what I chose to lead in with my demonstration time. This book was written by Henry Louis Gates, and it's his version of speculating what actually happened, which is in the foreword of the actual manuscript of Phillis Wheatley's poems, written by her owner, John Wheatley, attributing this work to her actually. There was great debate, as the term used at the time, whether a Negro could actually have the intelligence from their own place and their own intellect develop a creative practice. Thomas Jefferson, where I will be exhibiting at University of Virginia in a week or so, said that Black people were good at imitating, very good at sports and music, but when it came to things of creative or intellectual capacities, they were very good at just mimicking. So there was a question how she could have in such a short period of time been able to write prose in the way that she did. And that's something that has impacted me as well. And I think that can be a universal thing for anyone. Why am I doing what I do? What informs what I'm doing? And then this idea when you're being creative and then you're born in the 20th century, how original are you being, right? Where do you get your inspiration from? We have very upfront conversations now about appropriation and what ideas emerge from where, right? So this is an important book that I come back to very often. And I would say for me, ancestrally, Phillis Wheatley is a bit of a muse for me. And what the difference will be is I'm hoping I will not die penniless. That's oftentimes what we don't recognize. There are Phillis Wheatley centers all around this country. This month, everyone will be invoking her name along with Sojourner Truth. But these are not individuals who we see having made such an impact in our culture, did not have a life at the end that would be reflective of what they contributed. So this is oh, this is so dark. Is this dark because of where I'm sitting?
It's a little darker.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be critical. Y'all know I love you, Northern Voice Center. They know I do. That's how I feel so comfortable saying that out loud. So I do move between making what we would call, utilitarian pots, functional, into works that do challenge that and operate outside the mode of studio pottery. And I'm not a studio potter. So even in the introduction where you hear me talking about how I'm going to approach my demonstration, that's me being very vulnerable about the fact that I don't land in one specific area of working. I will go into any kiln. If there's clay left over, I'll use it and figure it out. So I'm a bit of a vagabond or itinerant. Maybe I'll sound a little more fancy. So this particular cup and saucer plate is about the Phillis Wheatley wrote a letter to George Washington, who at that same time was actively, I say on petty level, just on principle, had a warrant out for one of his enslaved women who escaped, but still took the time to write a letter to Phillis Wheatley. And she wrote a letter to him and he responded and held a 30-minute conversation with her. We don't have, Instagram and things like that from that time. So I don't know what they said, but this is about me sort of speculating. And that's what a lot of my titles do. They kind of bridge or allow me to find a way of that question. Why am I making what I'm making? And how does it operate in the world? Because I'm not a potter who's repeating pots. That's not super important to me. So that's this piece. Can you see the titles okay? Should I have read that? Okay, somebody could just shout out and let me know stuff. This book, and I have it with me today, so you'll see it, the actual the book that was given to me when I was 18, graduating from high school from my English teacher, Mrs. D'Augusto. She gave this to me as a graduation gift. And I've had this book, I've bought other copies that I keep much more neatly near me. But this book has been instrumental to me. And Dorothy Sterling started out mostly writing children's books, but then encountered this history. And as someone who survived the Holocaust, was surprised that she didn't know about this history of America. And instead of it kind of being this, well, my story versus this story, what she did was in that experience, amplify it and therefore gift that to me. This anthology of women's letters and stories and accounts and documents that aren't all solely filled with trauma, but also filled with a lot of accomplishments. So it has a valuable balance for me. Thinking about people who were alive in the, sort of 18th, 19th century, more so this focus is 19th century, right before I'm born in the middle of the 20th century, in the centennial year, 1976. I'm not afraid to say how old I am. And this is another anthology that she put together that's really important to me. So these are the things that inform my titles of the works. And my titles tend to be like mini novellas, and I don't care. Like if people don't want to read them, that's fine. But that's what I'm doing what Phyllis Wheatley did. This is what I want to write, and this is what I want to convey. And one thing that I did that's different, and we just had a faculty show at school, I actually didn't put labels up. And even in the exhibition in the Wiseman, there aren't labels in between the works because I don't want that disruption. But I laser engraved with my handwriting into a piece of paper and put several of those sheets in so people could hold that with them and read the titles. Read the titles and look at the work as they moved along. So trying to kind of disrupt that sort of framework that the gallery makes you sort of follow and bring it into the way that I encounter the research I do, sharing that part with the viewer as well when I'm not there. I know I'm teaching you all kinds of stuff. Take it in. I like that call and response. So again, always through my work, why am I making what makes me who I am? Ever since I read that book that Henry Louis Gates put together about Phyllis Wheatley, it really impacted me. And we are in the month of February. It's this 1 month where you get this like concentrated dose of whatever Black History Month. I mean, to me, it's always Black History Day month. It's every history month, right? Because I'm starting to learn how complex they are, how intersectional they are, how layered it is, how complicated it is, how family lines run. There's lots of things happening in these strange timelines and layers, which is, also how we get our clay. And from these different layers, all these disparate parts come together to make this unique clay body or glaze. So I said, I was just tired of seeing, I sell my shadow to support the substance. I don't even remember the phrase anymore. Sojourner's photograph that circulates this month. There's more to her than just that photograph. And the one thing I learned was that her first language was Dutch. And I remember learning a long time ago at the Cazenovia Convention in New York State, kind of around the time when New York manumitted, passed their manumission law. Frederick Douglass was there, Sojourner Truth was there, other abolitionists were there. And he did not have anything nice to say about Sojourner Truth. And I'm kind of personally offended by that. Just in the sense that Amiri Baraka doesn't have kind things to say about Phyllis Wheatley. I tend to put things out there. And I don't appreciate that. I just don't appreciate it. So it always stuck with me that he said that about her, that she was rather uncouth and didn't speak well. And so now it makes sense. She grew up with Dutch as her first language, and she learned English under duress. Once the Hardenberg's family lost their wealth and sold her away from her mother, she was purchased by an English family. She had no time to, acclimate. And it was a very terrible situation for her because she couldn't understand English. So, you get a deeper context of something and understand what someone's saying. So that's opened up a whole new realm for me, in that Hartford was actually first touched upon by the Dutch in like the real colonial way. I'm sure the Portuguese were there as well. And the Portuguese were there because of the East India Dutch Trading Company. There were a lot of people. Well, the Dutch had there was a lot. But the fact that that was for them the first trading post, where they were really interested in that site because of the Connecticut River. So I'm growing up all these years not understanding sort of the historical significance of the Connecticut River. And it's also a river Sojourner Truth went and traveled next to from New York up to Northampton, Massachusetts, and Harriet Tubman also spent time in Northampton, Massachusetts. So I'm starting to learn about these women in my life, and that they've been in the same space and place as me, and helped shape those places. Oh, that did work. So I just wanted to put this page in here because this is really important. Her name was not always Sojourner Truth. It was Isabella Baumfree. And when she emancipated herself, she changed her name to Sojourner Truth. And this is that account here. Sojourner asked the woman for a drink of water. "What is thy name?" said she. Said I, "Sojourner." "Where does thee get such a name as that?" Said I, "The Lord has given it to me." "Thee gave it to thyself, didn't thee?" she said, "and not the Lord? Has that been thy name long?" Said I, "No." "What was thy name?" So that's just a snippet of her interacting. So almost two also coming out of like Dutch and a Calvinist, like predeterminist, like spiritual framework. Someone emancipating themselves probably on a few different layers. You know, and even earlier, you're hearing me saying I'm sort of a vagabond and an itinerant sojourner. That's moving on and going forward. So finding a lot of permission in who they were, even as I live today. And so this is a piece about that moment. Sojourner recalled in her narrative that she orated and was transcribed for her. She said one night she prayed, and she said she audibly heard God tell her to wake up in the morning, right as the sun was rising, take her daughter and walk off. And that is exactly what she did. And New York had passed the manumission law, and she was going back and forth with the person who owns her, but still being polite. And I guess that ended, and she decided it was time to go. So that's what this piece is titled for. And so now moving back to DC, I felt like a lot of vindication when I went to the African American Museum. It's built in chronological order. So on the first floors that you enter into really deal sort of in the 14th and 15th century. And those are things I had been investigating. And that's also part of what brought me to India. West African, Sub-Sahara African, North African, were all trading with other cultures. They weren't sitting there just twiddling their thumbs, you know, not involved in any kind of technology or anything creative, that they had valuable items to trade with others as well. So it was really great to see this type of information for me and the ways that I'm thinking about my work. And the Portuguese. So there's a relationship and a dynamic between the Dutch and Portuguese. And I was going to travel to a place in India where there were enslaved Africans who were in captivity with the Portuguese, who are still they've assimilated in clothing to Indian culture, but they haven't changed their Africanness. They haven't intermarried. They're still the same group of people, almost similar to Gullah peoples in St. Helena. But I didn't make it there. And just so, as I spoke about earlier, this convergence of cultures, I'm looking at maybe sort of like those seeds of where things began, because sometimes we're only starting at a certain history depending on where we are. So I'm interested in kind of pushing a little back further and trying to find things that you could categorize as hidden, lost, or purposefully. So this leads me to Dejema Trading Post. So as I mentioned earlier, Hartford, Huis du Hoop, established by the Dutch as a trading post. The Dutch occupied this sort of created artificial island in Japan, and sort of the Nagasaki area. They were in this after the Japanese expelled the Portuguese. So the Dutch were there for a really long time during Japan's self exile from the world. So the Dutch were responsible for giving world information to the emperor. They had to schedule something like 6 weeks in advance just to meet with the emperor. And I read some of the logs of the captains, they were called, that were stationed there, and they're pretty depressing. They weren't living in super comfortable conditions. You know, it's almost like how corporate would treat their like lesser than people. And the emperor was really sort of hostile in the relationship. It wasn't a kumbaya kind of a situation. So I'm just really interested in the fact that the Dutch were there, Sojourner Truth and the Dutch impact. Even though it's called New England, there are a lot of things about New England that have a lot of residual cultural legacies of the Dutch culture. So here's a map of where the Fresh River, the Connecticut River, the speculation. So I'm also interested in that too, how they're interpreting the land without having an aerial view, but also this complicated way of determining what land you own, the sort of conversations between all these different European cultures about who gets to be where. And that's based on all the value and the resources of the land, which every time I go back to New York, you know, this sort of one of the few financial capitals of the world, started in this map also for the resources, and nothing looks the same. So Colt Factory, the original Colt Factory is at Dutch Point. I didn't even know half the time I was at Dutch Point. My professor from undergrad lived on High Shope Ave, which is Huis de Hoop, just adulterated into High Shope, you know, as you go through linguistics. I used to go over there all the time. It also was an artist's building on High Shope Ave. That's where he lived. He had his home and studio right there together. And also, as we know, if I'm talking about Japan, obviously we're in ceramics, we're talking about blue and white, you know, and that's a motif that just is. And I really never wanted to use it. Because again, it's like, am I just copying something? Am I just being like making the ceramics everybody's supposed to make? And it wasn't until here when I found myself connected to it that I felt I could then engage this blue and white palette for myself in the way that I wanted to. And that was also after learning that West Africans loved the blue and white fabrics and traded with India in textiles. So things have to mean something for me, and I have to feel connected. So the aesthetic can feel like my own. So here's some work I made at Kohler, using, again, now a limited palette of blue and white. I've gone right into it. And this is a book I was reading while I was there called Wicked Flesh, by Jessica Marie Johnson. And what it does is it really reveals a lot of ways in which women participated in, had autonomy, and how they made decisions as all this trade and commerce and colonization. It includes the dealings with Wolof and empire in West Africa, all along the coast. It's really fascinating. And so this piece is made for Senora Cathy. My Spanish isn't that great. I took French, but this is a Spanish word, alcaide. It's also sort of Portuguese, and it's defined as a ward of a prison. Someone who's in charge of something, like a territory. And that's exactly what she did. She interfaced with a lot of the business people of the East and West India trading companies. She had slaves herself, but had a different structure and way that her household worked. So this is kind of my historical marker to Senora Catty. And I also don't go into great depth on these things. And my titles are the way they are. So hopefully somebody's curious enough. We all walk around with these devices and you can look things up. And it's something I do in the classroom. If we can reframe our relationship to how we get information on these devices, maybe we can shift the algorithm. So I'm also kind of putting little things out for folks to be curious about and go look up for themselves, because I think that's important. It shouldn't only be from my perspective. My perspective comes with things that I'm shaped by, right? And I think it's important folks take some agency on their own as well to engage with that history. And so this is summer 2020. I was very fortunate to be able to spend that summer home with my parents. And I found this, what I decided to call a garden, because I had to leave a garden in South Carolina that I had for 4 years that became a part of my work. So you'll see the ways that that garden is in my work. And I would go here several times a week. There's, nothing else to do. That's the Connecticut River in the background. And if you look in the background well, you can't see it. It's the Founder's Bridge. But the arches on the bridge, I started to see in some work I did later how latent that imagery was for me. So in this little patch, oh yeah, see that video is not going to work. I don't know if my video is going to play, but there is thistle, and it's not brindleweed. I call it the wrong thing all the time, but both of them are not native to North America. They are on the continent of Asia and came in via Europe when I looked them up while I was there. So it's this other thing about being in a place where your origins aren't, but then here's this little patch, thriving, and the bees and the birds are still up in there, right? So these are categorized as weeds. But to me, I decided they weren't going to be weeds. They were going to be these flowers in my garden. And there was still pollination happening. So there was still something productive occurring in this space. All right, I have to go past this. Oh, sorry. So I extracted from my little garden and brought these things back with me and just decided to start making some work with them, arranging them, spending time with them, learning phonology. And sort of as we're in this, right, these early stages of the pandemic and ambiguity, actually confronting the temporal and ephemeral, temporary ephemeral quality of just being alive. So at this time, someone asked me to participate in a project they were working on about monuments and what is a monument. And this is the monument that I made. I let my monument be ephemeral. I'm not a monument. And at this time, we're seeing all these monuments come down. So I decided I would just embrace that and make this piece from my garden. That's all I had, and some of the soil. So discern, consider the river, 2 sides, 1 center, both for the one on shore and the one not. So this is my historical marker. I made this at Kohler. And I will be clear, I did not know that this is what I was making for that piece. I made this piece, came back to it later and spent time with it. And then that's how the title and I make those associations. I return to my work. I'm not someone who knows what piece I'm making, which can be really problematic. And so those are the coordinates for that exact spot where that garden is. And what happened at Kohler is I was making pieces that were about place, and the firing schedule changed from 35 hours to 26 hours. I understand factory life. I know why people buy Lazy Boys now. I thought I was gonna go home. Oh, I'm gonna read and I'm gonna sew. Your body says no. And we couldn't think, it just would be so hot in there and you're just working. We got the hours all messed up. and my piece was coming out at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And if you aren't there to get it, it goes down the assembly line and then a thing comes out and it'll just pull it and push it off the line into some coal. And so I made arrangements with the kiln manager. And so I picked it up. And when I picked it up, he said to me, yeah, I looked up those coordinates and I went to the old state house. I learned about Poon's Crandall. I said, what? Because I'm near Manitowoc. I'm near a port where grain, flour came in. I was speaking his language without knowing I was speaking his language. And we wound up having a whole conversation. And by the end of the time there, I helped him plan his trip to New England with his wife. And Prudence Crandall started the first school for young African-American girls in Connecticut. I didn't have to do any work. So also I was going down in my town in Windsor to the Farmington River, which is a tributary of the Connecticut River, and considering that as a garden as well. And you can see here, I'm trying to hold these things. So I'm trying to hold memories differently as well. So those are paper clay forms that I make with casting slip and using epoxy to embed and hold these pieces and these flowers and preserve them. Everybody's trying to always make sense of time, right? I don't think this is going to play, so I'm going to skip past it. But this is Tuktuki and Matu. Well, it's really just Tuktuki over there. You won't get to see Matu because you can see this is not playing. But they are two young girls I spent with who work on the tea plantations in Assam. And that was the first time I would say I really understood what freedom meant. I mean, I knew that here, but when I went to the first tea plantation I went to, and when I stepped on there and I saw the conditions that people live in, that was pretty profound because they still have the same conditions that they had about 125 plus years ago. Electricity is an issue, potable water is an issue, and the women and children suffer, the most on these plantations. And even before I got there, I never told my parents, but there were a lot of uprisings where they were going into the manager's house and they were decapitating them. And then I was taken to like a police station when I got there because they told me some Australians were there and stole $11,000. I don't know. It wasn't, I'm looking back, those probably weren't the smartest decisions, but yeah, I made it. I made it. But yeah, it was really difficult. And I also went to several of the agricultural colleges in the area. One of the professors said to me, where are you from? It's in America. Well, no, where are you from? Connecticut. No, where are your parents from? New Jersey. No, where's your father from? Washington, D.C. No, where are they from? I said, America. He didn't understand I didn't know anything beyond that time period. So I had to explain that I don't have that record. I don't know the specific place in West Africa, And he said to me, the difference between your people and the people on the tea plantations is that your people could see their chains. And so then I'm carrying that with me, but that was even before I went to the tea plantation. So I carried that there with me. And so each year well, not each year, but when I'm working and when things come together, there is a piece I make for Matu and Tuktuki, and I put their names in there. And I want to remember them and honor them. And in the video, at the end, they're singing in their language. They couldn't understand why I was there, just to see them and spend time with them. And as much as we could with a translator, I was trying to tell them about, where I'm from, why I'm there, which was pretty academic because I'm there on a Fulbright. But I spent time with the family. It was really, really wonderful. So this piece is up in the Wiseman, and right in the center there with that flower. And these are all imagined flowers that I make up. I'm not doing botanical renderings. Those are the coordinates for Jorhat, and they're the coordinates for the Toklai Tea Station, where I spent a lot of time learning about the history of tea and even the current and contemporary production of tea. I went to a lot of different tea plantations. And this is a spoon. I did just send this off. I lost the spoon. Sometimes I lose those in the shipping, even though I pack them really well. FedEx and UPS, you know. But this piece just went out to University of Virginia. So Thomas Jefferson, get ready to turn over in your grave. Because Tutu Giamatu is showing up along with me. I hope he has a heart attack. So here's some glimpses. We're getting sort of towards the end. So you can also start thinking about some questions or any comments you want to make that could, you know, that we could just have a conversation. This is cotton from my garden in South Carolina. And I'm a New Englander who moved to South Carolina. And I felt like I needed a passport more in South Carolina than I did in India. So it was a real cultural shift and adjustment for me. And one day, I just decided I was going to grow cotton. There was no profound moment behind it. I just had the Baker Seed catalog and they were selling it and I bought it. And I figured out through the ornamental growing law that I could grow it in South Carolina because nobody can't tell you can't grow cotton. I wasn't growing like marijuana. You know, because they're afraid of a boll weevil outbreak, whatever. It's so Monsanto, it's not even funny anymore. They have iPads and machines out there doing the cotton now. People, you know, aren't really super involved in that anymore. Well, on the line of control in Pakistan, they are. Women are still out there picking cotton. And that, again, is part of what I chose India for as well, in that relationship to cotton and how, you know, the war capital, right, of spice trade and textile trade, people were trying to cultivate the Europeans were trying to cultivate cotton and they weren't successful in coercing or they weren't successful doing it in India as they were in the early emergent colonial America of the South. So I just thought that was an interesting dynamic that had it been successful there, what would that have meant? But cotton was a subsistence crop in India. They were growing other things and then they were also spinning their own cotton in their home, you know, and fortunately, even with the weather and the climate, the Europeans couldn't sustain their health. So that was my way of doing sort of my own little comparative sort of study. And I'll tell you about a book. I'll explain that in a little bit. I just want to make it through a few more images. So here's my cotton. I grew one year just Sea Island cotton. I was in South Carolina. Sea Island is St. Helena Island. And I also grew Nanking, which is a cotton that's really associated with historically Chinese cotton, Nanking cotton. The white is the red foliated cotton that we see everywhere, sort of in like all the stores, is like this terrible symbol of how, you know, beautiful cotton is. And then Arkansas green lint cotton I grew as well. And here it is in the work. So I haven't processed any of the cotton. I don't have any interest in doing that. I just live with it. And then I eventually figure out how it intersects into my work. Plantation values the tension and only available pride as she waits for her cotton bushel weight to be revealed, then a victim of her success for another's reward. So I'm just thinking about what it's like at the end of the day. You have to have your bushel weighed, and that reflects how successful you were, how hard you worked. That's all measured. There were competitions, especially around the holiday time, for whoever picked the most. You know, you could get clothing, you could get a little bit of money. We have some systems that still work like that in some ways, right? Certainly not the same, but even thinking about that war capital, right? And those corporations, those issues do still exist. They just present differently. And we all do still have to navigate those ways of working and the assessment of your work and your value and whether you get to live comfortably or not. And this is when a time I started, I took a Master Gardener course too. And then this is when I was this years old when I learned how to harvest seeds, which I do still feel embarrassed about. But one day I was walking out the house and I had a pansy, you know. I started growing them. I became, even though I felt they were these kinds of, you just get them anywhere at any nursery. I started to get an affinity for them. And one day I'm walking down the steps and I see one of them. It's like a hand going like that. And it caught my eye. And I said, oh, smell the seeds. I said, oh, what's the seeds? And it was almost like it was giving them to me. And I spent all that time in India. And that's exactly what they use marigolds. They adorn all the deities. And it didn't occur to me until I grew marigolds, which my father loves to plant. When I figured out here the seed and saw how many seeds were in there, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Marigolds are totally generous. I don't think you understand how many seeds are in one head of a marigold flower when it goes to seed. I use these paper moon scabiosa seeds in my work a lot. I think they look like aliens and they don't look like seeds, but those are actually the seeds, and you do just put them in. And so the wonderful thing is all these seeds I've brought here, and I now am in a community garden, and all those seeds from South Carolina that I kept and packaged, I planted here. And so I'm working on a project with those seeds and using the coordinates of that exact place where I lived in South Carolina to the spot where my community garden is. That's on the seed envelope. And I've been, making my own seed envelopes, which maybe I guess you could say, Merge, these are seed envelopes, just different. This piece is in the exhibition, a gathering from the book I co-authored with Donald Clark in Northern Clay Center. I told you we go way back. They were the originating site of the exhibition, and it traveled. And it traveled to the Crocker Museum. So I'm gonna put you on Front Street. Put your hand up. And you gotta put it all the way up. I met Deborah in California. She drove all the way down from Reno, Nevada for this workshop. And I am gonna ask you to say something about that, because that is in the spirit of the work and everything. So here's this piece. Okay, now these are all just gratuitous pictures of my flowers that I keep around. I moved with all of my flowers and seeds, and Kohler let me go and treat the entire property like my garden. And that's what I would do over the lunch break, or when I just couldn't be in the studio anymore and listen to classic rock. I like classic rock, but at some point, you need a break. This is that's my car on the left. And then all the space in the house I was in, I started to put all the flowers in there to dry them. And then eventually it wound up in my studio space in the factory and in the house. And there were whatchamacallums in there, monarchs. What are they called? The little caterpillars. They were all up in there living with me too. And so this piece is in the Wiseman. So I spend a lot of time antiquing, and I found this merchandising mirror and bought it. And then it turned into this. And so this piece is on view at the Wiseman. And I titled these as needlepoint sampler portraits. So within that resin piece are all of my dried flowers from South Carolina. Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all can't see, but the little scabiosa, this is in the Wiseman. This is those seeds that you saw earlier are in this piece and in the darkened part. And this is for Sojourner and her mother. And here I am translating their names for you. And they took all that bland Dutch food and turned it into good food. I've been reading a lot about that. And that also extends from a book I read called The Potlicker Papers by John T. Edge. And that's a good book. All right, so here's a view. You can go see it at the Wiseman. I'm kind of towards the ends-ish. So I brought these books too. So I'll be showing some of these during the demonstration, and how quilting and that history and its association with textiles and things like that, and how that informed my work. So I'll talk a bit about that while I'm making some tiles. And these are just textiles I would see while I was walking around India. This is Melrose Plantation, and that is a looming area in my neighborhood that was in my neighborhood in India. I mean, it's the same thing to some degree. It was a jacquard in that one, but still what they're doing in the activity and the weaving. And so I'll close out here, and this is where we can be a little less formal because this just goes into, I did bring one of my molds of the bleach bottle. This is my photo data picture. My host took this picture of me at about 11 o'clock in the morning. 3 days later, the one on the left, I don't know who that is, but that's what I had to use to prove who I was going through India. They kept telling me the electricity was going out, and I only had 14 days to register as a foreigner. And if you don't do that, I could be fined $10,000 or not allowed back into the country for, I don't know, 10 years or something. Or I'd have to pay the 10,000 to get out or something like that. So I said to them, I came back, I said, I gotta get these pictures. I have got to go file. And they kept saying electricity. And then I really had to put the screws to them. And they brought that out. And I said, you've been photoshopping me the whole time. It's not electricity. So that was an interesting conversation. But that I had this bleach bottle before I went to India. I had probably 6 to 8 years before that. And it's just this object that I've had that I've taken with me everywhere I've moved. And I've just come to the conclusion that I'm done trying to figure out why I like it or why I have it. What it's been doing for me is making me make associations. Why doesn't Clorox make this bottle anymore? Wouldn't it be great if we just had these instead of the ugly plastic bottle? That's number one. Number two, it still had value because I bought it at an antique shop. Someone had the faith that someone would have paid for it, but it didn't have its contents in it, which at one point made it valuable. Clorox only spent time using this bottle for about 3 years in the 40s and went on to different designs. And obviously, as we see now, plastic. All the other bottles, these aren't like they're everywhere because of what they're made of. They've been recycled down into glass and exist in other things. So I find that really interesting. So here's how they wound up at the Wiseman. I knew that I did not want them to be on pedestals because I didn't want them to read as discrete objects or something like decorative. As I look at the work and spent time with it, it's mirrored acrylic. It's not an actual mirror. In order to see the quote unquote other side, you have to shift around. You have to look. The words are backwards that I've put on there. They're also in different languages. And I love this in this iteration where you can see my work behind you, which is very different from this work. I'm still very vulnerable about how different this work looks than my other work. And so these are just some artists from the book. This was if I needed to fill time. I think that's it. That's the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few minutes here. If you want to open it up.
Oh, okay.
I know we had one in the chat, Patty. The question was, did you immediately recognize the plants in the garden as non-native plants, or were you more drawn to the garden itself and found out more through research?
I just saw that that was the only place where things were growing. And I did consider them flowers. I only consider a weed something growing that I didn't intend to grow around the things I want growing. But when I was at Kohler, I knew most people thought those were weeds, but I think they're pretty. Wild carrot that calls itself Queen Anne's lace. Now that's a bold move. So yeah. I thought meadows were meadows. I don't think they're wheat. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's cool. It is, isn't it? Yeah, have y'all seen those the Polish lace making, Puerto Rican lace making, and then looking at those flowers? If you look, each head has a head, It is a kaleidoscope microscope thing. It is like making lace, I think. Yeah. Hi, Larry. I liked your talk too.
Oh,
I was there.
oh, thank you. I'm kind of curious. This is kind of a half-baked question, but from the time that you see something or experience something that you find kind of cathartic or inspirational, what's your process of then eventually turning that around and making it into perhaps like an object? You know what I mean? Like, so how do you get from, I guess, point A to point B with your creative process?
I bought that bleach bottle in like 2006.
We're
and-
both antique aficionados.
Yes, I heard you say that. You went to Hunt and Gather. I have a bottle in my bag, I think, that I bought from there.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a slow burn. I'm a slow burn. So I don't have, and that goes back to what I said earlier about time, and I think that's the nice thing when you get to sort of mature as an artist, you just can work on your own time and feeling comfortable. I'm not always fully comfortable about that. But I find myself really drawn to people who know exactly what their work is going to be and can execute it that way. I really enjoy work like that too. Because I get to learn from how they work that way to sort of speed up.
So is there kind of like a percolation?
Yeah, it has to percolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have to probably encounter some leftover clay. I have to encounter something that is like that has been left to the side. Right. So then I got the problem for myself of making it all make sense.
My question kind of, yours flows into mine a little bit in that the work that you've shown is sculptural, functional, hangs on walls, like there's, kind of a vast variety. So when you're working through topics, does it just come to you in whatever way, or is there a more specific process that you land on what the idea needs to be in object form?
No, because I can't even like smally lie, because my dear friend is sitting here who orders things for me at the last and has seen how at the 11th hour things come together. So my epiphanies are sometimes solely technical and have zero to do with the conceptual thing. I kind of just got a sense of it, and then I scramble to get all those things and that's where my quilting comes back in, because it's a quilting bee. People are helping me, because you can't know everything.
Yeah.
So I think the community part is important in my work. People who will come in and see those opportunities and ask me questions about what I'm trying to visualize. So yeah, I wish I was more attuned in that way. But that's just how it
Just
works.
very authentic, sort of like use your gut
Yeah.
intuition. Yeah.
But I know enough to know I can't intuition the shelves on the wall. Right? So I do know where and that's the nice part. It gives you some distance. You sometimes need that distance, because I'm not going to convey all those ideas in the piece for every single viewer. I let that go a long time ago. Part of it, which is nice about working in clay. Yeah, and even though I'm pushing some of the aspects of gallery codes, having that framework is super helpful, right?
Yeah.
It's super helpful. It gives you some boundaries and it gives you things to be accountable to.
Sure.
So I do have a value for that. I don't just like dismantle something with no blueprint to put it back together.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question before we move to Anna's. All right.
Oh wait, Deborah's supposed to say something.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Deborah.
What do you want me to say? What sort of topic?
Well, whatever you just share what you just share.
So when I met Chotsani was in Sacramento, and I was so eager to see the show that had started here in Northern Clay. I'm from Minnesota, but lived in the West for a while. And what I was so struck by, as I am again today, is just how much you're thinking about place and about time and space and the connections between things. And so in this workshop, one of the things we were doing was just how to use the paper clay. And you were saying, like, you need to go work on something that you're familiar. The familiarity was important, I think, was a message I took from your presentation. And so what I was doing that day was taking one of your forms that you use your quilts, and I was reinterpreting them as the Ukrainian egg, my heritage is Czech. And so we were kind of messing around with that idea. And then I ran out of time and just like did this squiggle. and it just spoke to me personally as like this, Russian aggression in Ukraine and destroying this beautiful culture, and so that actually, you kind of changed my life, because I ended up.
Oh, no.
Okay, so. You inspired me.
I'm not queen, I'm not wild carrot.
But you.
I would
You
probably.
inspired me to take, to enroll, and so now, I'm now taking ceramics at the University of Reno and exploring this whole idea of Ukrainian eggs and Russian aggression, and it's just been this marvelous journey
And
that kind of got a spark lit.
And I do want to close it out by attributing that to Clay solely. That's not me. All I do is, because I've worked with Clay, I'm translating what Clay holds. I want to be clear about that. I didn't invent it. I just happen to listen to it in a certain way, different than other people. And that is the power of Clay. It speaks a whole bunch of different languages that everybody can hear, you know?
It's all connected, it's all
Yep,
there.
yep.
Well, it's, yeah. It's
Yep.
a beautiful medium.
So I can't take credit for that.
We were there when it happened.
Yes.
So there.
Thank you again, Chotsani. And next up, we have, for our afternoon presentations, we forgot to be formal. We have Anna Metcalfe, who lives and works in Minneapolis, where she graduated from the University of Minnesota in 2009 with her MFA. Anna currently teaches at the Minneapolis College in downtown. Wait, you're at Minneapolis College. I'm sorry about that. In downtown Minneapolis. Interested in the junction of public art and craft, makes work inspired by water, agriculture, food, and community. As a teaching artist, Metcalfe loves to promote collaboration in interdisciplinary learning environments between the sciences and art making. She is a recipient of a Jerome Foundation Emerging Artist Project Grant for Public Art in 2009, a Minnesota State Arts Board Artist Initiative Grant, and a Jerome Foundation Study and Travel Grant in 2013, 15, and 17. And there was also, sorry, I'm losing light here. Sorry, Anna. In 2018, was an Open Studio Fellow at Franconia Sculpture Park. Without any further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to Anna Metcalfe.
Thank you so much. And my goodness, where is Chotsani sitting? I feel like I just have to acknowledge how amazing that presentation was. And also, I found myself getting caught up in like all of the threads that you were weaving, Chotsani, and this like really intricate and beautiful web, and marveling at it, just sort of like wrapping myself in it. And part of why I'm saying that is because my process and my brain is so different. And I really like, I find that I have to immerse myself in situations and with people who are like you, Chotsani. So all the more reason to spend some time together. I'm really, really inspired by you and your work. So I'm gonna start from a like place, which I was really reflecting on the sort of starting point for Chotsani. It felt really similar, but boy, do we approach it from two different ways. I like really think about like the land that I come from as quite like literally and molecularly producing me and my ideas. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge the places that I'm from and that I live in and that I have called home. This is the confluence of the Shenandoah and the Potomac rivers at a place called Harper's Ferry, or really close to Harper's Ferry. And I grew up in Virginia, just about 70 miles west of Washington, D.C. This is my hometown, which, as you can tell, has no town in it. And the whole entire county has no stoplights. Like there's not a single stoplight in the whole county. It's just right down the mountain from the Shenandoah National Park. And so I grew up in like I grew up on about 20 acres and a little creek bed. And that was, I think, probably my first interaction with clay. I didn't really know what it was when I was playing with it as a kid, but I definitely made pots out of clay and dandelion buds like long before I knew that it was clay. And so I heard a term not too long ago. I've been kind of reflecting a little bit on living here in the cities, and how I am really sort of a product of a different environment, and that I feel sort of displaced or misplaced sometimes. I love living here. I love the cities, but I spend a lot more time like kind of cultivating gardens in my mind than I actually have space for in my yard. But so I think actually Chotsani, you and I need to like garden together. But yeah, I heard this term people from the rural diaspora, which is this really interesting way of thinking about a phenomena that's been happening, here in probably all around the world, but certainly in places like Minnesota and Virginia, where people grew up on farms and family farms closed down or got sold or whatever, all that the sort of selling off of family farms and the urbanization of our population, and that there's a lot of people who have in their bodies and sort of sense of being a connection to land and to mud and grass and sky and all of the things that are readily at hand in a rural environment, and that you have to seek out in urban environments. And that term, rural diaspora, the people who came from rural areas and are now living in cities, really resonated with me because it felt like, oh, that's my soul right there. I can sense the longing sort of on a daily basis. And not that I want to move back to Virginia. There's so many things I love about Minnesota and the cities, but it is truly a part of the way that I approach making work and the way that I think about forming clay as a substance. When I was in my 20s, it's hard to see, but this is a picture of a little town called Certaldo, which is in Tuscany. And I lived for 2 years, actually a little bit more than 2 years, and worked at this place called La Meridiana, which is a clay art center. And I think when I lived in Italy, the sort of most important thing that I began to understand was the connection between land, season, and food. And if you've ever visited Italy, and I think there's the spirit of it in lots of Italian cooking, even here in the United States. But you don't eat artichokes outside of the time that artichokes come up in early spring, that there's a seasonality to the food and very specific dishes that are associated with like when certain things bud, right? And also like new olive oil coming out of the just pressed olive oil has this like super peppery spice to it, and there's some very specific meals that are eaten like with the first pressing, and that only happens once a year. And so I never even it seems silly, I think we live in a much more aware universe when it comes to food now, but growing up in Virginia with like a Midwestern mom who made tuna noodle casserole once a week at least, which by the way, I love tuna noodle casserole. But it never even occurred to me that like there was a connection. So this like living in and immersed in this culture and in this space was something that really informed not only the way that I think about making ceramic work, but also just like consuming the world around me, right? And I also lived really close to Lake Superior for a couple of years. I taught at Northland College, and the photo on the upper right is of a geology professor there named Tom Fitz, who became a friend of mine. And his sense of place was, of course, informed by the geologic history of that place. And he and I and a couple of other faculty members from Northland College actually did a circle tour of the lake and investigated parts of the lake and its people and its geology from our various disciplines. And I investigated it from the perspective of the story that the human, like how humans who lived there, the culture that was kind of constructed over time and impacted the actual landscape and the land. But that rock there is something that I think about a lot as far as like my connection to other ages and animals and other humans that you know, it's just kind of a remarkable thing to pick up a hunk of clay and to ask yourself, where has this been? What was this? And how am I connected to this place and its past? And this is a beautiful sunset over the Mississippi River. I think looking at, I want to say it's the railroad bridge, right in like sort of north of Lake Street. This is sort of like my little home beach that I can walk about a mile and get to. And so this is my home now. This is my water and my space and my air. As you'll see towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm working on now, which is really truly investigating the clay here. And it's kind of like changed my practice and my life in a way that I had no idea it could be that profound. So these are just, I wanted to throw in a couple of pictures of some early pieces of work that I made because I love pottery. I have always loved making things that people use. I think there's that like food connection too that I've loved being a part of. I'm pretty sure that one of the main reasons that I stuck with making ceramics or making pottery was because of the potlucks that I got to go to. And there's this sort of tactile beauty and sort of like I can almost like look at certain pots and smell the food that I consumed and then the people that I got to hang out with and learn about. And so you can see that my work formally is influenced by sort of the natural world as a sort of overarching theme. But I think more than anything, it is the presence of being with other people and eating delicious food that actually made me a potter. Because let's be honest, I love to eat. And so I then found myself in graduate school, and I don't know, sometimes when I think about like going to graduate school, it's with this pang because I think I got there and I had this sort of like I like idyllic version of what I was gonna do in grad school, which was like become an artist. But I went to grad school and I didn't even really think of myself as an artist when I went to grad school. I was so immersed in the world of pottery. And I was so like sort of scared out of my wits when I got there because I felt like a fish out of water. Like I didn't really know. I just like to make stuff. But one of the things, if you don't know about it, the University of Minnesota is very, which is where I went to grad school. It's very heady. There's a lot of incredibly intellectual people that teach and work and go to school there. And the direction of the program when I was there wasn't necessarily not conducive to my work or to making pottery, not in the least, but I was just so I guess, inspired by and maybe intimidated by, I think is probably a good way of thinking about it. All like how smart people were. And so I went and took all of these amazing art history classes, and I started to really question like what the heck am I, like what is art? How does this all fit together? There's this like crazy dichotomy between craft and art, and I was all sort of mixed up about it. And I think I really I became like just a little bit confused, I'll be really honest with you. And so at a certain point, I really started to think about, okay, what's true to me about making art, and then also hearing about the truth in other people's experiences. And one of the most incredible sort of moments was taking a class with an artist named Christine Baumler, who still teaches at the U. She's just an amazing person. And it was actually the first time that she taught this class. But it was kind of actually, I think Laura, my friend Laura is also here, was also in that class with me. It was the first time that the department taught a class on what is now known as well, I actually don't even know what it's called at the U right now, but social practice. Yes. But yeah. And it wasn't, so this was back in, the early 2000s when we didn't have that name. But Christine brought the sort of notion of social practice, art making into the department with this sort of experimental class. And it blew my mind that you could have the idea of event or connection, community, conversation, be art, right? And I kept on thinking, well, that's like what I've been doing my whole life, is I make these things that people use, and they sit down and they have tea together, and they eat some delicious food, and they have a conversation. And actually it's the conversation that's the thing. It is the object, but it's also the conversation. And so I really started to think about the connection that craft has to this sort of new notion back then. Right now, it's not new at all. It's a thing, and it's actually a whole department at the U. So recently I read this book called Live Form, and it's Women, Ceramics, and Community. It's by this art historian who lives out in California named Jenny Sorkin. And I'll just read it to you really quick. This is like super art history speak. So I'll just tell you what it means to me. But she says it was modern craft and not modern art that spearheaded non-hierarchical and participatory experiences through the experiential properties endemic to craft practices, and in particular ceramics. And it, like, to read this just sort of validated my experience in a way that like truly made me feel like, oh, okay, I can call myself, I'm a part of the art world now, which may not be something that other folks in here can really relate to, but I really struggled with like, where did I fit and what did I want to make, and why, right? I think Chotsani got at that too. So I was inspired to really start embracing ceramics and craft, and also for all the reasons that I loved it, but because it has this really incredible history of being utilitarian, right? There's a function to clay that human history has sort of worked with for, I don't know, 20,000 years or so. That is, yeah, I'm a part of that, right? I didn't have to question that any longer. And this is actually the project that I made along with Laura and a couple of other people who were taking that class. This was our sort of final project that ended up becoming like a 4-year project. But we ended up working with this group of kids who they were connected to, actually, I won't go into the whole detail, but they were connected to a bunch of different organizations that created mostly at this point, they did some urban gardening, but they mostly did they like kind of constructed rain gardens for areas in St. Paul. And so Christine had received a grant to construct a rain garden, and then we worked on a public art piece for the rain garden. And naturally, clay does really well in the elements if it's like, you know, the right clay in the right spot. And so we made this like walkway, this little pathway that the kids actually created these the tiles with us. And so then it became a part of this landscape, this environment. And it was just kind of like the first time that I was able to see that my practice can not only be something that is like in the world physically and perceived and thought of as beautiful, and maybe even used, but that it can also transform the land, right? It can become a positive force in the world. And that really was, I think, the thing that propelled me as an artist moving on from graduate school. And so I'm going to show you a couple of projects that I worked on that sort of ran with this idea that my practice was a thing that not only allowed me to make objects using the substance that I was truly in love with, but that also was able to connect with people and place and story. And so this is a project that I did shortly after graduate school, or it was sort of like in graduate school at the same time. But I worked with the same bunch of kids actually, and asked them to kind of tell their story of like how did they see the work that they were doing in the like by making rain gardens and urban gardening, how did they see that work affecting the landscape around them? And so you can see up in the upper right hand corner, I gave them a template, and they did their own storytelling based on these prompts that I gave them and conversations that we all had together. And I took those and made, I don't know, an insane number of screens and screen printed them onto these boats. And then we had a couple of interactions where we sort of like took the stories back to the water and offered in this sort of ritualistic way, offered the stories back to the water. And so that's what you see in the lower right-hand corner is the kids are actually holding their boats, parading around Lake Phelan. And then on the lower left, the boats, they're like kind of nestled. Actually, Laura took that photograph. Where's Laura? She's here right now. That is a Laura Corcoran photograph. And so we were able to kind of like send those stories back down the river. And shortly after that, I got a grant from Forecast Public Art to do a collaborative work with another artist named Grace Davitt. And we used the funding from that to we called it Thursday Nights Out. And it was Grace lived right on this block. This is behind a Lutheran church right off of Plymouth in North Minneapolis. And we hosted basically barbecues every Thursday, but we brought handmade pottery to the festivities. And on any given week, we would have like somewhere between 20 and like, I think 60 was like our biggest turnout. And it was essentially just a time for the community to come and eat together and meet one another. We did this, I think it was six Thursdays in a row over the summer. And then at the last cookout, we gave away all the plates to the community members who'd been coming. So from there, I really began to think about, okay, so there's part of what's happening in these events is storytelling. And how can the story, so I started to think about, so in this picture, I would say the primary audience for this work was the folks who came to the cookouts. But I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I tell the story of this to other people? Like, how can there maybe be a secondary audience? How could this be inspiring to people? And also just sort of practically, like, people wanted, you know, I had sort of photos of this. And so, like, if I tell the story of this, is it the photo that I show? Is it the work that I show? Like, do I save a plate? You know, there's all these questions about the event and then the object, and where do these things sort of live in the world together? And so I started to think about the object as being a place where a story could also be told. And so this is a piece that I made in reaction to that circle tour that I told you about around Lake Superior. So you can see up in the right-hand corner, the lake is constructed out of wire, or it's actually like 1/4-inch steel. And the topographic lines are precisely like illustrated there to create the depth of the lake. And then all of these little boats hang down to create the basin of the lake. But what is on the boats, so you can see how they kind of hover in space and create that lake. What's on the boats was a collection of like points in the lake, like nautical points in the lake, and also historical. Like when we did the circle tour, I was able to visit a bunch of historical societies, and I actually got access to a couple of letters that people had written from like the turn of the century, like the 19th century. And then I also interviewed a bunch of people, and some of the boats actually have QR codes on them, which it's hard to see, but right the one that's really dark on the wall here has actually a QR code. And if you connect to the QR code, this was like way back in the like first days of QR codes, so they sort of work. But it'll bring you to a geolocation, and then also recorded stories that I had recorded along the tour. And it became this is called a living topography. And so it became a piece about the people that created the lake. And then fast forward to about I think this is 2015. I won a commission, my first sort of commission to do a public art project at the Landmark Center in St. Paul. So this is like the exterior and the interior of the Landmark Center. And I was tasked to reflect something about the center and its history. And as I did my research, it turned out that the Landmark Center was the former post office of St. Paul. It was like a kind of the main floor was a huge post office. And so I invited the public to come over the course of that summer, 2015, and write letters or write notes about their experiences of the Landmark Center, events that they'd been to there, the history that they knew of it. And then I screen printed those letters onto actual porcelain letters. And then they're hanging now still in the, I think it's the southeast hallway, like up the staircase as you enter into the building. And the map that is hanging is a map from the year in which the Landmark Center was officially completed. So I think it was like, I can't remember, it's like 1890 or 1880 or something like that. So this is the city street of like the city blocks, the way that it looked like in whatever year it was that the Landmark Center was actually completed. And this brings me to, I'm going to show you 3 more projects. The first 2 are projects that are kind of still ongoing in many ways. but that I worked on like the physical parts of them, sort of starting in about 2015, 2016, and then kind of completing them even within the last couple of years. I'm still making work for them and working on them. But this first project is called Pop-Up Picnics. I I was super interested in like the story that bees told about, I got like really I did a deep dive into the world of bees because it became really clear to me that like there was a connection between what was happening in our environment, and I think I started hearing all about like bees dying off, and how like our food system is really endangered because of the lack of pollination that will eventually happen once all of the species of bees die or don't have the the right number of or the right kind of food to eat. And so I started working with a organization that is still around called the Bee's Knees. They they teach classes about beekeeping, and they do this like fun honey extraction process with bicycles. They're sort of a bicycle like a bicycle company. Like they do all of sort of like how Peace Coffee delivers their coffee on bikes. The Bee's Knees were kind of thinking in that way too. And so between the bikes and the bees, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a cool company. And so I worked, and it took many, like there was many iterations of the plates and the project, but ultimately I designed this set of hexagonal plates that also had the map of the metro area on it. Those plates fit into these picnic boxes. There's just sort of this so this is like where I think Chotsani and I like this would, when I finished this project, I just wanted to like dive into somebody else's mind, like yours, where I don't know, wherever Chotsani is, because this was so top down, right? Like it was very like I had to make the boxes to fit the plates. I had to make the plates to fit the like map. I had to, it was like all so sort of precise with its like the way that it was constructed, and it made me crazy. And I also collaborated with a bunch of other artists. And again, my dear friend Laura here is the artist who made the bees. Let's see. So the bee drawings and also the flower drawings were originally Laura's drawings, and then I used those and printed them onto the ceramic objects. I had to work with a cartographer to get this map to fit and to work and to have all of the data points the way that I wanted them to. And I worked with a guy who builds bikes and then there was a person who designed the boxes for me, right? So there's like I don't think that any artist should have to like be good at everything, and I'm so like in favor of collaboration and like community sort of building things, because this project was truly like it came out of the mind of many amazing artists and artisans. So I had this bike built to create, or to be able to carry the picnics into picnic spaces, so that then we could go and set up the picnics and have the picnic puzzle happen. And so this is just a photograph of one of the picnics that I did in the beginning of when this project was completed. And I think this was in Boom Island was the name of this park. And so in addition to doing the puzzle, then we also, of course, had like a community picnic. And the puzzle was really about kind of identifying where we were in the metro area, where we knew to be community gardens, public gardens, where we also might know bees to have homes. So like beekeepers exist in the cities. There's actually quite a few hives in the cities. And so we were able to plot out like what we knew of these places. And it's a really interesting thing because, of course, you can see on the map where there are green spaces, but you can also see where there's the lack of green spaces and the lack of access to greenery and fresh foods and things like that. And so it also became about identifying the parts of the city where there was privilege and the parts of the city where there wasn't the same amount of access to good food. And because of that, it really turned into thinking about, like, in a bigger picture, the metaphors that hives can teach us, which is, of course, that scientists, when they think about beehives or honeybees, they think about the hive as the organism rather than the individual bee, mostly because the hive cannot function, like a bee cannot function without the rest of the hive in order to survive. And because of the way that our world is, it's becoming more and more challenging for hives to survive, right? So the interconnectedness of the species, both the ones that pollinate our food, but then also together, like the queen bee, the drones, and the worker bees, they depend upon each other and we depend on them. So there's this like really complex web of interconnectedness and dependency that I wanted to illustrate through this project. And then, of course, like what better way to actually have those conversations, but through food and picnic together. And that is going to bring me to this project, which is Upstream. And I'll just start really quickly by sharing sort of a little bit of background about this. When my family is, so I grew up in Virginia, but my grandparents on my mom's side lived in La Crosse, Wisconsin for a lot of the time that I grew up. And so we would actually come out to the Midwest and visit my grandparents. We would fly into Minneapolis and drive down the river to La Crosse. And my grandfather grew up just south of La Crosse, Wisconsin, at this tiny little place called Mount Sterling. So when I knew my grandfather, he was a very stoic person. He was a survivor of the Second World War, and he was a POW for 2 years. And he just like did not emote anything, except when he talked about the Mississippi River. Because he had this relationship with the river and the waters in the river that was just like profoundly connected. It was like a friend to him. And so I was so inspired. And I have always thought of the river as sort of like this, I mean, it is larger than life, right? But it has this personality in my mind that is really connected to the way that my grandfather talked about it and thought about it and lived along it and visited it and took us to see it. And so then when I actually moved here to Minneapolis to go to graduate school, I was like feeling pretty excited about the fact that I was going to be like able to cross the river every single day, you know, I lived on the East Bank and I was going to school on the West Bank. And I quickly realized that, and so I would like take walks along the river and I like really made a lot of time to try and connect to it because it just felt so special to me. But I realized that I knew the Mississippi River kind of like we know a celebrity, and that my grandfather knew the river like a friend. And it was something I started to reflect a lot, and I still am reflecting a lot on the ways of knowing land and water. And I think that in the contemporary life through colonization, among other ways of sort of like taking us away from the land, that we've lost lots of ways of knowing it and knowing water. And so I started to really think about, like, how do we know these places? Like, how does it become, it's a part of us molecularly, right? Like, we are 73, somewhere between 71 and 73% water, which means that all of us are 73% Mississippi River, which means that all of us are more alike than we are different from each other molecularly. And yet at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like I know it. And I know that part of myself as well as I could, as well as my ancestors did, as well as many people do. And so I started to ask, like, how do you know the water? How do you know the river? So this project is really about beginning to understand people's ways of knowing the water, knowing the river. And on these cups in the photograph are stories that I actually took from like historic accounts of the Mississippi River right around the time of like the colonization of the river by non-Indigenous peoples, mostly because that's the record that we have, but also as an acknowledgement of the fact that there is this layer of sort of removal of self from land and trying to control and power over things that are not ours and not ours even really to take or give, right? And yet somehow as a country we managed to do that in a really destructive way. So it's a bit of a acknowledgement of that, but it's also the written history. That's the place where the written history really began of the Mississippi River. And what I did was I asked people to take a cup and replace that with their own version of the history of the Mississippi River or a story that they had of it. And so I collected these like little paper cups, essentially like I gave everybody a piece of paper to write down their story on, and then you could fold it up and turn it into this little cup. And so by the end of this installation, I still have like a few cups, like 1 or 2 cups, but for the most part, I was able to collect stories in place of the cups. And then those stories are ones that began to populate cups that I made in subsequent sort of years. And so this is a picture of this project, which I now call Upstream. This takes place in the Willamette River Valley, outside of Portland, Oregon. And I used some of the stories that I collected from the Mississippi River and made a series of cups that then people from the Willamette River Valley used to have tea together. And then they wrote out stories and sent them back to me. And I used their stories to put on these cups. And then when I went out there for an event, actually I was there for NCECA, I hosted a bunch of tea conversations using the cups that had been given to me with this, or the stories that had been given to me on the cups that I made, and then gave those away and then collected a bunch of other stories. And there begins this project that I have been working on since about 2017. And so these are some photos of that, like one of the little tea conversation events that I hosted. And since then I've been doing the same project in many like iterations and ways. And throughout the sort of history of the project, like the emphasis has changed a little bit depending on the community. So this is actually, I got a fellowship to I was one of the fellows at Franconia Sculpture Garden, or what is it? Sculpture Park, is that what it's called? And I turned a trailer into a tea room and hosted a bunch of tea conversations out of the trailer at Franconia. And so I would have themes when I did that. When it was actually for the year that it was at Franconia, I had themed conversations. So I had a tea conversation with a bunch of farmers. And what was super interesting about that was they were like, oh, water. It's either like it's either we need it really badly or we have way too much of it. And so that really kind of opened my eyes to the sort of tenuous relationship that farmers have with water. But then I also had a conversation with a bunch of artists in the area, which was a really interesting conversation because, of course, they had a much different perspective. And so out of that, I have this collection of stories that has just grown and grown and grown. And I haven't done an official count recently, but I know that the last time I counted, I had collected and given away about 500 cups and stories. And so this project is still like one that I am working with and kind of thinking about. But around this time last year, this traveling tea trailer was stolen from my backyard, along with all of, I like in the wintertime, I use it as sort of like my storage unit for the project. So I like put everything in it and sort of closed it down for the year. So I lost all of the story. Well, not all of them. I do have quite a few that I have digitized. But all the paper stories were like in a box. They were literally in a shoebox. And yeah, they're gone. And so that moment was like, oh my gosh, it was just like one of the most heartbreaking moments for me, because the project was so much about the sort of generosity of my community and of water itself, right? That water freely gives and takes, it freely gives and we take. It doesn't ask us for anything. And all of the stories that were given to me were freely given to me, and I gave cups in return. So the spirit of this project was so compromised when it was taken away from me. And I have been really wrestling with what next for this, and how do I think about this project again. And I will say that it will have another place. It will have a future. And I'm actually working, my demonstration is going to show a little bit about where it's going now. But it is, I think it's a really interesting, place to start with loss, and then trying to figure out how does that experience work itself into the future of this project. And I also just want to address, because clearly I'm referencing blue and white, right? And so to Chotsani's point about blue and white, boy, does it have some history. And it has some like really amazing cultural history where cultural information is like shared and distorted and misused, and but then also kind of combined together to create new. And so it does it's a complex history. And I started using it way back in graduate school, because I was really interested in how most people have seen a blue and white something or other, that despite sort of like all of our various histories, we have probably seen, somebody had a China set that had blue and white on it somewhere. Maybe even we've used it. And so it has this like sort of ubiquitous quality that we all know what it is, that there's no mystery about it. And my hope was that in referencing that sense of commonality. It's all over the world. That it would also be able to draw people in who might not necessarily find themselves compelled to participate in a public art project, right? That it would be something that was welcoming to more people than not. So that's my point of reference for blue and white. But I also like, I also find blue and white to be challenging right now because of things like mining, and cobalt is a part of our electronic processing right now, and there's like the way in which like the price fluctuates, and it's like this precious thing, but it also is really destructive. So I'm wrestling with my relationship to cobalt right now, and I'm currently not using it, not because I'm not ever going to use it again, but because I'm just not sure how I want to talk about it right now. But that is going to bring me to the last thing that I'm going to tell you about, which is the project that I'm working on right now, and that is I got a opportunity to make a piece of public art for it's an academic building at the University of Minnesota in Duluth, so UMD. The piece that I am making, they really wanted it to reflect ideas about the lake, the Lake Superior, which is just down the hill from UMD, and people's kind of perceptions of water in the lake. I'm going to read you this quote from this book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, because it'll help me sort of tell you the sort of angle from which I've been thinking about this project. And if you have never read Braiding Sweetgrass, it's my new Bible. It's an incredible piece of writing, and it's helps connect me to place in a way that I think is really potent and relevant right now. So this is from Braiding Sweetgrass. Each of us can name these wounded spaces. So she starts off by talking about Superfund sites, and that's what she means by wounded spaces. So sites that have been destroyed by industry. Each of us can name these wounded spaces. We keep them in our mind and our hearts. The question is, what do we do in response? We could take the path of fear and despair. And then a little bit later, she goes on to talk about another writer, Joanna Macy. Joanna Macy writes that until we can grieve for our planet, we cannot love it. Grieving is a sign of spiritual health, but it is not enough to weep for our lost landscapes. We have to put our hands in the earth to make ourselves whole again. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world is holding us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. And that sentiment really arrested me because I struggle a lot with, like, how do I talk about the world when there's so much, I feel so much despair and kind of hopelessness. And at the same time, I am able to show you pictures like the ones that I opened my presentation with that are full of this like joy and peace and the gift that water and the earth gives us. How do I stride that? Like, how do I have both and this gave me permission, I think, to speak about the world that I live in with both grief and hope. And also to think about the fact that, yes, even a wounded world is feeding me. And I am eating, and I hope to give in return something that will make it a better place. And so this really inspired, but this is so complex, right? There's so much here. And that is actually how my relationship is with making work about the environment. It's complex, it's hard, it changes from day to day, and that's okay. So these photos are from actually this is from Brighton Beach, right outside like north of Duluth, if you've ever been there. And when I was up kind of doing, I was like looking for inspiration and was kind of talking to some of the folks up in Duluth about the project. I took my daughter, so this is Ada on the right, and we went down to Brighton Beach. She is a like water lover, and oh my gosh, does she like rocks. And so we also, while we were on this beach, we found this hunk of clay, and I just like made this funny little pinch pot cup. And then I found this like really beautiful piece of birch bark, and Ada found this feather, and we made this little effigy, or cairn, or however you want to call it, but we just sort of offered it. It was our little offering to the space. And from there, I realized, oh, okay, so Duluth is essentially made out of clay. And I saw actually Liz James, I think might be one of the Zoom people. And Liz teaches at University of Minnesota Duluth. And she gifted me with part of her backyard, which is a hunk of clay essentially. And it was because as I was conceiving the idea for this project, I realized, oh my gosh, what better way of talking about this space by using the land itself. I've never done that before. How have I never done that before? I've never dug clay. Like it was this sort of like new world that I can't believe that I haven't done until I was 40. How old am I now? I don't know. I'm 45 now. So I was 44. I had never done this before. Like I've seen people do it and I've heard about people doing it. There's like this whole wild clay thing, but I had never done it. And so I embarked on this pathway and had my world completely transformed. So Liz gave me a hunk of clay from her backyard. I tested it. It was great. It was amazing clay. It turned out this like gorgeous, like really bright and deep red. And then through a series of conversations, I was connected with the geology department at UMD. And through more conversations, I was connected with this gentleman here, whose name is Andy Breckenridge, who studies clay. That's his thing. And specifically, he studies what he calls varves, clay varves, which are the deposition layers of the glacial sediment that created the basin of the lake. And that also, of course, coats the entire sort of northern part of Minnesota. And so this is him digging. There's my super duper helper who like, she was just like so intent on helping. And you can see like the picture on the left, I don't know how well you can see it on the wall here, but there are these striations and they're literal deposition layers of when the glacier came, deposited a year's worth of soil, and then receded and then deposited more. And so the bottom of the hill is the gray clay and the top of the hill is the red clay. So me and my amazing friend and trusty studio assistant Haley, who's also here, went and dug clay. We took Ada along with us and hauled, I don't even know how many gallons of clay. I don't want to say how far, with a 3-year-old on our shoulders. But in addition to that, Liz James put me in touch with this wonderful person named Emily Ford, who is the chief gardener at the Glen Sheen Mansion. And Emily happened to be planting a bunch of trees with her crew that year, last summer. And they needed to remediate the soil because it was so full of clay. So they had to dig up all the clay and then replace it with topsoil. And so she asked if I wanted the clay. So over a period of, I don't know, 4 months, I collected what I think is now about 40 5-gallon buckets of soil from the Glen Sheen Mansion, and tested it and kind of figured out how to process it. I would say actually Haley figured out how to process it. We had a possum visit. That's the footsteps in the bottom. And we ran all these amazing tests and got some pretty amazing results. There's depending on where like how old the clay is, where as if it's at the bottom of the hill or the top of the hill, it'll completely depend on the color. And so then from there, I started designing the piece. Once I kind of figured out what clay I was going to use, turns out it was all Glensheen Mansion clay that constructed the piece. I also had been having conversations with and working with a group of scientists at UMD who are with a really cool organization called the Natural Resources Research Institute. Natural Resources Research Institute, NRRI. And they are a non-academic research group investigating literally natural resources in northern Minnesota. And so they put together a list of species that are iconic to the North Shore now, but that are also in danger of not being there. So those 23, I think, species are the ones that comprise the components to this project. You can see here, I'm making a bunch of tiles. They're carved out at the base. This is pictures from the installation, sort of process of the installation. I worked with actually the same fellow who designed the picnic boxes. He helped me kind of figure out how to break apart the project and create substrate for the tiles and then hang them. And then this is oh, it's kind of hard to see. This is in my studio with a lot of shadows, but this is without any slip on it. This is just the tiles all put together. And then this is what it looks like in the space now. And all of the clay, all of the colors that you see are dug from, well, let's see, the red, the whole thing is made out of the Glensheen clay. And then the white areas are actually from a research vessel. The geology department has a research vessel that takes core samples of the bottom of the lake, and those core samples, so like a mile down, basically in the middle of the lake, that is the white. And then the orange is straight, like a hunk of clay straight off of Brighton Beach. I just found it. It was like beautiful, and I brought it home and fired it, and it turns out it's this amazing orange color. And so quite literally, this piece was constructed of the land that it's picturing. And this is actually an unfinished photograph because I'm still working on some of the there's three-dimensional pieces that are actually going to hang onto the piece that are still in the kiln, essentially. So, and that is where my studio practice has taken me to this very day. And that's all.
I have a question. Circumventing Lake Superior. So you went all the way around, all the way back around Michigan, yada yada. How long did that take?
It's about 1,000 miles, a little less than 1,000 miles. So I was gone for about a month. I drove. I didn't walk or anything crazy like that. I thought about kayaking, but that was clearly out of the question.
There are some people who are walking.
Oh, yes.
Water walking.
Yes, yes. And I actually have interviewed some of those folks too. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anna. We really appreciate your presentation. So everyone, we are not totally done yet. We also have a series of demos from Chotsani and Anna. I'm going to flip the room. So if everyone just kind of wants to get up, take a stretch, we have some treats up on the counter. But I'm just going to be wheeling some stuff in and out of the room for a moment, just to try to get everything ready for the demonstration portion. We'll probably get started back up here at about 3:45. So please feel free to take a walk around. The studios are totally open. Bathrooms are in the hallway or on the other side of the building. The studio artist area also open.
You guys maybe. Wow. You can see those little eggs. Yeah, still.
I think I might be on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you.
My cousin.
So that's Kim, who I work with, my friend too. And she's an expert mold maker, not. Look at my mold.
Is this the Clorox bottle?
It is,
Okay.
but I don't know actually. Yes, it is.
Okay.
But it's, so I started getting more of them. Larry was talking about antiquing. So now this is all, every time I find one of these, I think I found like what is it, an Indiana Jones thing?
The Lost Grail.
Whatever, any of the movies, right?
It's cool.
Yep, so I got that one. I've been collecting Hylex bottles. I've been finding those because Hylex was here in St. Paul. Y'all know the Hylex gnomes?
Yeah.
You know the Hylex gnomes. I have told other people about Hylex gnomes.
From the
and
Winter
I'm not even
Carnival,
from
too,
here.
when I was a little girl.
Yes,
They would have these weird, like,
Yeah.
paper mache hats and these little legs, it was bizarre.
that's the Hylex gnomes. So I've been getting the Hylex bottles. I didn't bring that one. And then someone asked a question about when does something happen? I think Haley too, you were sort of asking. This I got in Wichita because an antique shop was closing. I didn't want to come back. I wanted to take it over and run it. I got a a silver plated ladle. Feel like I stole it. I think the guy just wanted to get me out of there. Kidney and liver cure. And so this has got Rochester, New York on it. So Rochester, New York isn't far from Hudson, New York. That's where Sojourner Truth was. There are a lot of, and I just read in here, I'll have to find it. So this is what Ms. D'Augusto gave me. You can see. Look at this. This is terrible. It says discarded. Shame on you, Manchester Public Library.
Thank you.
I know, right? The Mary Cheney Library. So in some of the letters here, and I'll find it, it's Rochester. I'll look in the index. I'll be a good librarian student. This is what you try to teach students now when they look on YouTube. Like you have to do this to verify. Like you have to find, then you have to have you got all your footnotes and stuff.
Is this a clay that you know?
Yes, this is the clay that I shouldn't say I dug. It was dug for me, which is just an incredible thing. But between myself and Haley, we processed it. So, and it is like delightful. Could I have a piece of paper? Just like a printer paper. Anything.
Perfect. We have lots of that.
What did you need?
Printer paper.
I don't.
Some kind of paper.
I thought I meant. So it says, and Alex Chen was telling me, he's from Western Massachusetts. It says, the greatest trial, perhaps, that mother was called upon to endure was the leaving her Massachusetts home for Rochester, where father established the North Star. So the North Star was a paper, abolitionist center paper, and it's actually on a list in the timeline quilt that is in the Wiseman Museum. I listed a bunch of the newspapers from that time, started by African Americans and abolitionists. The atmosphere in which she was placed lacked the genial cordiality that greeted her in Massachusetts. There were only a few that learned to know her, for she drew herself around a certain reserve after meeting her new acquaintances that forbade any very near approach to her. So Rosetta was not being fully candid when she wrote this. The Anti-Slavery Women of Rochester, a group that included Susan B. Anthony and Amy Post. That's a complicated relationship there. That's why I wasn't all that, when everybody wore the suffragist stuff to them, like, okay, let's bring that down a notch. Wasn't all. Harriet Jacobs' friends were no less cordial than the women of Lynn. Anna Douglas's, Frederick Douglass's wife, reserve grew out of an ambiguous situation in her household. Her husband had returned from England in triumph, a leader of the anti-slavery movement and a public figure who was the most attractive to women. Soon after the North Star started, a cultivated English woman, Julia Griffiths, arrived in Rochester to help edit the paper and to raise money for its support. So that's how I find these connections, it's what you try to teach students, Anna. Teaching art is hard to do. So how do you teach them to fall in that space and trust it when at the same time you're in classes that are professionalizing you to look like you know what you're doing all the time? You never know what you're doing. You don't.
You set yourself up for that one. No, you are.
There's no cordiality here.
What? No, not at all.
So there's an example there. Spending time in an antique shop is like a library for me. Discarded objects, and then what is the story of how somebody decided they were going to keep this, put it in a booth that they have to pay a monthly rental on, probably trying to mitigate some border tendencies. So yeah, I think I'll pass this around. So you're gonna have to help me because this is all busted up.
I actually think
So maybe I'll just won't make the mold on that part, and then I'll figure something out on the top. So then I don't even have to ask you. No, you let me know.
I think that what you said though is actually the hardest part of teaching. Because it's like, how do you teach like creativity, I guess? And you can't. So I think exactly what you like, that's this sort of like you flip through a thing, or you like touch something, or you, I don't know, it's like it's almost like impossible to say the thing that's going to lead, to the next step, and except for sort of curiosity. And so how do you teach curiosity is what I want to know.
I don't know, because it goes back to everything we were talking about when you're living in a world with such extremes of two opposites.
Right.
I don't know. Usually this is the threshold. You can step over, everyone's invited in. There are students who clearly stay on the other side. They're like,
If they're taught how to take tests, you see,
Right.
they have to do them right,
yep,
and creativity isn't a part of it at all.
no,
So it needs to start with elementary teachers and people,
and that I came here and I try to do when they do the high school credits, and try to share some of those things, show that appreciation, like tell them they can do it, but you find out, then they start talking, you're like, it's impossible to do their job. It's almost impossible to teach art, K through 12. I brought this so I could start. So I bought, this is Laguna's coffee slip. Of course, I didn't bring the test I fired, but it's like chocolate like that. It just doesn't go orange. It goes really dark.
This, so I can pass this around. So the clay is this, prior to 04. And then this is my little like cheat sheet. You can see I've like written my numbers here. So I don't know if you can remember the final photo that I showed. This is the bottom of the lake clay. This is Sidge made from
I was just about to ask.
Glensheen Mansion clay. And then this one, yep, this one is the stuff that I found on Brighton Beach. And so then all of these are just like, this is 2 parts lake clay, 1 part Brighton Beach, half and half. 2 parts Brighton Beach, 1 part lake.
How much did you have to process all of that before you started thirding and 2/3?
Well, a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of there was a lot
Yeah.
of pictures.
Yeah, so what we ended up, I mean, there's so many different ways of like processing raw clay. And what we decided was that I think probably safest and best for our purposes was, I'm saying our because Haley is in the audience and Haley did the book. In fact, I wish I could like post that poster up in my daughter like head to toe covered in clay and Haley like grinning next to her. But yeah, we dried it all out, slaked it down, mixed it, sieved it through ultimately a window sieve, and we tried a bunch of different sieves. Turned out the window mesh was the best. And then dried it out. I made these kind of like
Did it twice. Yeah, and you're like a 60 mesh.
Really?
Mhm.
See? But I think we ended up adding enough grit back in.
Then we went
Yeah.
back and added more.
Yeah. Because actually I did some batches that was just through a single window mesh and it ended up being about the, and then
Yeah, because that was the first one that we added.
yeah. So this is the, and there's like, it, you know, depending on, I'm guessing like where it came from the grounds and also like the grounds of the Glensheen Mansion. And also like how deep it was. There's different colors and variations and yeah, and then some of the other stuff came from this place called, well, it's outside of a town called Renshaw, Minnesota, which is where there used to be an old brick factory. And so the geologist, the pictures of the geologist were from there, and there was like this whole escarpment that actually had mostly collapsed. So it was like a hillside, and you had to kind of like dig down to get into the layers. But like, you know, it was clearly hill, top newer, bottom older, and the color difference. So this is the bottom of the hill. And this is the, yeah, this is the top of the hill. So these are just slips made from that clay. And what I started to do was using these to screen print rather than using cobalt.
I know the cobalt, I'm using fake cobalt.
What is fake
Started
cobalt?
using mason stains.
Oh,
I was just
are they better?
I used Wedgwood mason stain.
Is it better for the world?
It's not cobalt. Is anything, because then I'll start crying during the demo.
Let's read the sweetgrass quote again, shall we?
So I use a plug, so I'm gonna put this plug in. This is my 3D printed plug. So I made these. Outside. I think it's just dirty. Yeah. So instead of turning it over, that's what I learned. The bottle is like early industrial. So when I brought it to Kohler and asked the mold makers to look at it, they were laughing at it and making fun of it because it doesn't roll. It's all off and everything. And I'm like, how do you just laughing? Your stuff was off at some point too. So it's this industrial bottle I'm using. I have another bag. Okay. Clean it. So there's some imperfections in it. So it was easier to drain it rather than trying to turn it over so that it wouldn't collapse on itself. And then I don't have to turn it over. I don't know if this is gonna fit. Oh yeah, it does. There we go.
That mold was made of colors.
No, I made these and 3D printed them. I didn't make I don't have any molds left from Kohler. I didn't feel like dealing with them, number one. And they were really used up.
Yeah.
And they just were too heavy on the palette. I think I brought one back just for sentimentality. Small little mold. I think these are tight enough. I have to check.
We got.
Oh yeah, I'm making a mold in front of you too.
My molds were really bad.
Huh?
Very like rough and tumble.
Yeah, but yours was good too. What's rough and tumble?
All the molds I make, I beat on them pretty bad, so I don't make them that well again.
So it's a 4-piece.
I think that everybody who has ever learned how to make mold from Kim Roth should raise their hands. Because that is how I know how to do it.
Well, I did an undergrad and that was that good class.
So to do a clay mold, you don't have to soak these or anything.
Wait, what?
You're doing the clay, right? So you don't have to soak the molds or anything, like for plasticine, you have to. I don't think you do with clay, right?
You would use like you're talking like pulling the,
Yeah, what's that?
you would use like, usually like Murphy's like
Oil.
oil, so
Oh, you mean when you're
Which-
casting the plaster? to soap it.
Well, how are you gonna get the clay away from the plaster?
It kind of shrinks a little bit.
Oh, it just does it.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, the plaster pulls
So you
the
don't need
moisture
to-
out. Now,
okay,
no, I needed all of that when I made the mold though.
I get you.
Yeah, I had to put that in between so that those things wouldn't stick together.
Sure.
Yeah. And of course, I bought the funnel after I made the sword. At some point, I could 3D print this.
Otherwise, wax.
I haven't done that yet.
And then you part.
And I'll just pour slow enough so it doesn't. Oh, thank you. I can put some off.
So I have brought a screen print of a story that I got from a participant in a tea conversation in Dubuque, Iowa. And I'm doing this backwards. I usually, so the cups that I have been making are actually cast. So that I can exactly get the curve of the cup to the curve of the story, like little form that I have. But because I am not even about to try and cast this clay, I'm actually doing it backwards. So I have the shape of the story that now I'm trying to throw the cup to rather than doing it the other way around. So all I did was I just took like a piece of paper and just traced the shape of the story, which is then gonna be the thing that is gonna, and I just messed up on that one, so I'm making another.
So I learned you need some gravity when you pour the mold. I just get a funnel to replicate what I learned at Cola. Don't ask me to explain it. I just know you need it. You should have it. But I've made molds before and you don't have to have it, you know. But since they said so, I do it. I thought it was a good thing. So that way, I guess too, okay, I do know a little bit. When the clay shrinks, it's like anything, you want to put more in there so it has something to pull from.
So that's casting clay that you just bought?
Yeah, casting slip.
That's,
Mhm,
okay,
mhm. Which is clay,
okay.
but it's deflocculated clay. So they put a material in there, kind of a deflocculant, and all the particles, the charge outside each particle is repelled against each other. So that's when you get that suspension. And that also helps you not have to have a lot of water so that it'll do the thing it does. I usually have my notes in front of me when I'm talking to students. I'm in my notebook, reading my notes from years ago with Lisa Stinson. I have all my tests. So I can show them, I got B's. I got B's. B is not bad. And she still wrote very good. So this one is fast. It's only like 6 minutes, 7 minutes or something. Wow. I'll put a timer on. I haven't done it in a while. So yeah, these are the parts so that you don't ruin the inside, or you can easily get the funnels in. So these are like for when I make other molds, and then you can put that in as you're making the mold. And then you can have your stopper. Do I have a mention? I don't think I have a big, is this a mention?
Hannah, how many screen prints do you have in your repertoire?
Like how many streets? Well, one. Oh, that one. I have once I digitize the story, then I don't have to save. I can always remake a screen. So what I try and do when I'm making batches though is I line them up so that I can print. I'll pull out when I don't have the clay in my hands, I'll pull out a sheet that you can see like what a whole sheet looks like. And I would say I have collected, I haven't digitized all the stories that I've collected, but I've collected over 500. So, I haven't turned all of those into screens and stories, but I've turned a lot of them into screens and stories. So, yeah, but I don't keep them around. I will refill.
I make square tiles too, but I really became interested in the ovals, as you can see from that antique one I had. These came before the mirror. So I'll just be using these. And now that I have a laser cutter, I can make my own shapes. But these are just old ones. So I'll do a couple different sizes. And that's what I did, what Deb was talking about. I made them and then bisque fired them and then just traveled with them. So everyone could paint on bisqueware. But today I'll just do greenware. Got little ones.
They use paper plate sometimes.
That's too much of what I was gonna do this and then you gotta get plaster and it takes up. But that's, the paper clay is how I make the spoons and the ribbons on the spoons.
You mixing that or you buying that?
Oh, I mix that. I just use toilet paper and casting soot. And then I just add the toilet paper, plunge it, and then use old dishwashing liquid bottles and shampoo bottles. They all squeeze out different shapes and lines. Just fold them all up. Today I thought I'd do some stamping and brushwork. So while I was in India, part of the research was between, like I said, the cotton and the tea plantation, so just textiles and things. So I spent a lot of time in Jaipur, and I went to the Anoki Museum, which is intended to preserve the tradition of block printing. That's what's on all the fabrics. And there was a block printer in the museum, and I said, well, I'm gonna find one when I get back to Varanasi, and I did. Didn't speak any English. I had to learn just enough Hindi to talk to him for him to, call me and know who it was. And I would just bring him these drawings on pieces of paper. And like my laser cutter, he replicated my exact. It wasn't this thing like here where someone would be like, well, I feel like these lines in the relationships don't really work together and you might want to consider taking it and moving this one over here because you really want it to pop and you want it to read. You didn't do any of that. You would just look at the drawing and then he would point to some things that didn't have like quite clarity, sometimes when you're pen or pencil, and I would go, and he knew that meant I didn't need it. So he'd put an X through it and then he would just go like that. And I'd come back and these would exist.
Oh my God.
And he told me I have very good handwriting. So I was very impressed. So this is a stamp that says pick, and that's another thing about comfortability, when they ask for things, they want work you've made in the last 3 years. I'm using these. You don't understand what I went through to get these. I will use these for as long as I want to. So if you see it in work from 6 years ago and you have a problem with it, so and someone can grab them and pass them around too.
One of my students just gave a presentation on Viola Fry.
Huh?
And she had a
1 minute.
she collected tchotchkes and made molded them and then cast them into things. And there was one that showed up like over 20, 25, maybe 30 years of her work. So you're fine.
Thank you.
Not that you needed anyone to tell you it was fine.
Well, no, but it is helpful. It is helpful. So yeah, when I was able to mention a little bit in the talk about cotton, still near where I was, and it was on my visa that I could not go into Pakistan. I mean, that was like serious business. Someone tried to be sent home. That would have been a really interesting opportunity for me to have been able to do that for the women who are picking cotton on the line of control in Pakistan, so if I'm thinking about, as Anna was also talking about, all these intersections and layers, I am connected to that people group through a commodity in a deeper way. But because, again, like that professor said to me, there was something in my history that allows me this freedom, but they don't have that same experience and I can't connect to them. That's why it was important for me to connect with Matu and Tuki, because their lives aren't going to change. they're not even on the Indian census. They're not Assamese. They live in Assam, but they're not Assamese. It's no different than the way Indigenous people are relegated to reservations here, right? But they don't even have the identity as being a nation. They are a laboring class. Yeah. All right, I think I can do it. Another minute went, and then there was some time between when I was talking.
Chotsani, how did you get connected with them?
And just asking people who finally made a connection. Usually use a lower.
Can I ask about the Fulbright? Can you just talk about that a little bit more?
There we go. Success. So I read a book called The Time for Tea by Priya Chatterjee. Oh, my whole little thing came out. These are old molds. They've pulled a lot of. I'm gonna have to fix that. I walked the stack, so I found this book. It's pretty color and everything. And I saw tea because I was making these things and calling them tea cups. So again, why am I making something, right? And she gave a history of the tea plantations, and there were some similarities, but the major difference was that the English actually promoted the family, because it was mainly the English who landed there and acted like they invented tea. They did not. And so what was happening was the young women working on the tea plantations, who they brought up from Bihar, which is Bengal, down low. So they were referred to as jungly. Sounds familiar, right? And they made like promises of what would happen. That's not what happened. They wound up on these plantations. And unlike Southern plantations, they were not giving birth at high rates, right? To create another future labor force. So then they started saying, well, you need permission from your family. And in India, as a Hindu, you're Indus, English again, like Connecticut is not the indigenous word for the it's not Mashtucket people. So it's Indus, but Hinduism is to get married and have a family. So they started to see how important that was. And they would, once they signed it, you get permission from your family to go, then go back. Then they wanted the family there. And then once they started to see, we've got to get them to stop working so they can bring their children to term. That's where they develop maternity laws.
Oh,
That's where we get this idea, the initial idea of maternity leave, right? I'm not saying that's when it happened, because we're still having a problem with getting leave to raise a child that the very company you work for wants to grow up to buy that product too, but doesn't like the child at that moment that you have to keep it. So we still have a problem with that. But that's what I reckoned. And then I saw there was a striking difference. The family unit was sustained, whereas on a cotton plantation, the family unit was like the kryptonite to the success of enslaving and oppressing a people group. But then the flip side is, though, I do have a family now, right? And those two young girls do, but they're not with their families during the week, because when I met them, they were at the house that they were caring for children for to earn extra money. That's what they were there for. They weren't just there. So they were nannies as well. So I read that book, started thinking about that, where could my work go? And I had a colleague who went to India. And she did come back once and said, I found your ghat, and it was in Varanasi, and it was to a deity of the many, and it just said Chosati, Chotsati, something like that, Chosati Devi or Gavi or something like that. And then I had a student when I was teaching at Wesleyan Potters who was Indian and brought a book in for me, and we just started talking, and I went to grad school with a Indian student and talked with her, and then found this book and was like, oh, I think I could make a project out of it. And I gave it a shot, and I did. I know I didn't go for ceramics. Okay, a lot of what I do doesn't have anything to do with clay most of the time. Even though the work looks really, really clay. So what Anna talked about between craft, art, world, that's why I said that thing about feeling like a vagabond or a itinerant kind of You know, I do, I look at people's houses when who are, you know, peers in clay and stuff, and they've got cups they've collected, and they know all these people. All I've got is depression era glass and bleach bottles. Only since, coming here, I buy pots in the gallery because I want to support. And I only started going to the St. Croix pottery tour when I moved here, right? And in Seco, it wasn't like I was itching to go to Seco all the time because they were not friendly. They got a little bit better, but that's not the friendliest, like.
Really?
That's what Taylor's doing.
Well, I think they're trying really hard to.
And I don't, yeah, I can record it. It's okay. You don't have to edit it out.
A poorly rendered voiceover.
They're awesome.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a different kind of scene, that's all. So I'm kind of getting like, yesterday I bought Lisa Orr pot into class. Great pots, make some plays. I think that's high art.
You think that's what?
High art and high craft. I think it's all the things.
Yeah.
Just working with negative space, filling that space. So again, pushing it right to utility where you're drinking and you have a window in your cup. You get any better than that. That's like close to depression era glass, if you ask me. Hitting all the spots. Okay, so I'll start cutting some tiles. Sean made up some underglazes, and I'll use some of those. And I'm just gonna be making stuff up because I'm in front of people, so I'm not really working. What kind of paper is that?
This is Gompi paper, which is it's used for like sheen collé and printmaking.
For what?
Sheen collé, which is like layering prints, like layering imagery, but through sort of translucent paper. But it's so Gompi is a root. It's like rice paper, but it's I'm gonna pass this around so you can kind of feel it. The amazing thing about Gompi paper is that when it gets wet, it actually starts to stretch a little bit rather than tear, which is the reason why I like it. It's also so thin, which means that when I try and transfer, if I were to print onto if I were to print onto thicker paper, I have to apply more water to go through a thicker piece of substance. But then what happens is it does it unevenly and it starts to bleed. So this, I can get really precise prints with this paper, which isn't necessarily what, people who do printmaking on clay, not everybody wants that precision, but because I'm using text in a very specific way, I want it to be as precise as I can get it. And this paper is just like kind of where it's at. The man this is handmade paper though. So it's like, I think it's like $2 a sheet or something. And the man who made this particular batch passed away. And so I have the last of it.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't reached the buyer at Wet Paint, which is where I get it, to see like what the cost of a similar product is going to be, because I know it's going to be like $6 a sheet or something. But anyway, I'll pass this around because you can see how, and that's cobalt oxide. And I brought with me some slip, because I just wanted to show you quick like how I make it the viscosity of printing. And because clearly if I were to try and print with this, it's just not gonna work, right? It's way too watery. So I actually put, this is CMC gum. It's just dry powder. So I'm gonna do a bad thing and not put a mask on right now. For the record, you should wear a mask. You don't want to get CMC gunpowder in your lungs. Do you need this? Hold your breath. I'm just kidding. What does it say? Wayne Wallace. Yeah.
Back to cobalt though, I do feel a little irritated that, because I've done the same thing, you know, once I see the price of it and then try to use it, because I like cobalt, you know, it's great. But why, as two people who are making this work, where we're being super mindful and considerate, why are we bearing the entire burden of the technologies industry's responsibility upon ourselves when we're using,
Like recycling.
yeah, right? You know?
Sorry, I'm gonna be loud really quick.
I needed water.
Oh, there's some.
Speaking, oh, I can use this?
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know if I grabbed my.
Here, I'm gonna give you more space because I don't.
I'm gonna grab a sponge really quick. Like big sponge, little sponge.
No, little sponge.
Sorry, I'm taking it.
No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not. I've just had this here. Put that back. I left my little cart over here and I have a cart. I got a whole cart. I have multiple carts. Oh, you didn't get a cart. I have a cart.
I have a 3-year-old.
I got all the cards. As in, you get more table. I have the, you know, like a transfer station.
Speaking of my 3-year-old, I don't know if they're gonna come or not, but she is gonna come.
It's like that situation, that schedule situation.
Oh, and yeah, general. Okay, so I just put some in there. Like a teaspoon. It thickens it. It also makes it adhere to the paper so that it doesn't just flake off, right? So like if you were to just like put clay or underglaze on a piece of paper, at a certain point, it would just like dry and then sort of like crumble off. But the CMC gum actually like it's like a little bit of glue, but it's water based. So when so like if you put water on it, then it releases because of hydrogen bonding, right? We love water. The water like attracts itself to the water in the clay and it releases it from the paper.
I usually sandwich these, but I don't have a matching size for this one for some reason. Let's do it freehand. You know, I'll sandwich them so that they don't warp and then they're drying evenly, so I can put a little weight on top. I'm trying to clean up as I go.
Wait, what do you do?
I'll sandwich with another, I think this one is the same size. So I'll do that so that I can clean up and then they dry.
Yeah, took about one day.
See,
So I guess
you learn something new every. So did you just laser
I
cut
bought
those or?
I bought these. Yeah, this is pre-laser cutter knowledge and machine possession. So now, yes, these will be taking on some shape iterations, you know? So I can actually explore the whole all the different patternings and quilting, so I can what's the word, quasi translate the space of a stitch or a pattern, I guess. Because when I do make the strip tiles, I'm free cutting those, but it would be nice maybe to use a jig to find some replication in those for fitting and maybe planning them out more. What is this? Is an actual piece of clay in here that survived.
All right, making a smoothie over here. I'm just trying to get this to the same viscosity of screen printing ink. Approximately.
Your slip starting from important or kind of random?
Kind of random. I mean, this both of these slips are very, like a little bit goes a long way. So this one had a little bit less water in it than the one that I made earlier. But yeah, so the more watery it is, the more CMC gum you have to add. But what I also find happens is that it actually goes through the screen a little bit better too. So it kind of is a little give and take.
That's like casting slip, Haley. That's in the
Okay.
neighborhood of how she's trying to thicken it without adding. Like the way you thought you would think making casting slip would be adding water. It's not.
Right, yeah, okay.
I mean, we're just burning all of my talking karma on making a smoothie.
There is a game called Poop Smoothie. Do you know that game?
Did your daughter invent that?
No, I learned this in grad school. Poop Smoothie.
How do you play it?
You put, it's like, oh, because we also call it the hat games. Oh, hi. There she is.
It looks like nap time just ended.
Yeah, did she just get up?
She was sleeping.
Okay, I'm gonna make a loud noise. What are the rules of Poop Smoothie? The hat game? You know,
Yeah, you've already said, write all the names of famous people down and they put them on the hat and then.
you're gonna play like charades or something.
Well, 3 words, you have 3 words to describe that person,
Oh, yeah.
everybody guesses. And you put them all back in the hat, so people kind of know who the people are, they've heard the name once. Then you have 1 word to describe that person. And then round 2, and then you put them all back in the hat, and the final one is charades.
Right. We don't have any words.
Yeah, it's they, Alan Paul.
I don't know where Poop Smoothie came from.
Yeah, is that a 30 Rock thing? No, Brett, you said Brett.
I don't know, but I don't know where. Yeah. I ate that.
So usually when I'm doing this, I'm listening to C-SPAN. Oh God, histories and lectures and history, not actual C-SPAN where people call up. Because it's so-and-so calling from the Republican. Well, I'm really, no, I'm not listening to that. I only listen to that with my dad.
I listen to books on tape.
Or I'll do that. Or I'll listen to Columbo for the 8 millionth time. He's good. Columbo.
You anticipated all my needs, Sean. Thank you. Super good.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Yeah.
So the Trading Post exhibition was here. Northern Clay so they didn't know me from a hole in the wall. And I wrote a proposal for that in Sika, not only because a friend was working here and they were panicking that proposals hadn't come in. And sometimes people are last minute people anyway. So I said, oh, let me help my friend out. So I don't know, she just sent out an SOS, send the proposals. I was like, all right, I'll help a friend. And I came up with this theme of a trading post and wrote it all up. And she thought we would, get it and this, that, and the other. We should be getting a call. They were like, thank you, no. somehow I got it was a nice rejection letter. It was like, maybe we can find you. It's not a hard no, but we might be able to find a venue, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, they don't know where I work. I can't maybe anything. Around the conference time. If anyone knows the exhibitions work, you're pretty much on your own, unless you are hooked up with a venue that selected you, right? So then you have some infrastructural support in the place, they have operating hours. Otherwise, you have the gallery sit for yourself, install, know exactly how many pedestals you need. You have to like be super prepared.
Find the pedestals.
Right. If you haven't picked up on it, I'm not that super prepared because I work organically. And I did, and so I said to my friend, I said, now that I'm looking back at the proposal, I didn't mention ceramics once, or clay, or anything. So that might be a problem. Then I get a call from Sarah Milfleet. Am I saying her last name right? Sarah Felt. Oh, sorry, Sarah. She'll remind me of how her name is pronounced the next time I see her. But she calls me up and says, I want to have that, I want your proposal in our at Northern Clay Center. She goes on, and the last thing she says is, so do you want to think about it? I was like, what she think she's talking to? Why is she asking me? I said, yeah, I'll do it. I just thought that was really nice, no one in Clay. I wasn't like a name, I'm not like a name, and I don't even name Clay. So Northern Clay Center has supported me. And that was in 2019. So they didn't do it out of local obligation. I always like to make a point of that. It's before, BIPOC and diversity and all that. So, shout out to Sarah. So we had it here, and they did treat us like royalty. Tippy is marvelous. That's when Emily was here, Emily Roman. And we had a really nice show. So I also, when Anna's image of letters came up in the post office at the Landmark Center, part of the exhibition had a writing component. So the artists I invited to be in the show, I made stationery and letters with Trading Post 1633. 1633 is the year Windsor was founded. That's the town I grew up in. Born in Hartford, grew up in Windsor. And I pre-stamped and addressed everything for them. So all they had to do was really write their letter, put it in the envelope. Even the envelopes inside that they would use, they chose who they addressed it to, like that they wrote. But the stamp was already there. And we did that part leading up to the exhibition so that when we got here, they said, do you want to have some text on the wall? I'm like, I know that is not an easy thing to do. I was taken aback. That's a really big gesture to offer. And so we did that, and all the vinyl was on the wall, and everyone sent in one of their favorite excerpts from a letter that someone sent them.
Cool.
Yeah. And so then, you didn't know who wrote it. That didn't quite matter. And they were all really, really beautiful. And then we set up a writing station. That kind of came up last minute. Found a table. We put a bunch of the envelopes and things that I brought that I had and made kind of a collage under the glass tabletop. And then I brought some letters with me. I just brought a few envelopes that were stamped, and I didn't think anybody was like, listen, sit here and write a letter. It's hard enough for all of us to sit down and write a letter in this age of where you have to recalibrate to write a letter versus sending an email or a text message. We put them out there, and she came back. She's like, you have to put more letters out there. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, they're all gone. Yeah. So they're out there in the world somewhere, some of these Trading Post envelopes. So that'll probably be where the seed packets come back in with the Trading Post. And again, here's a response, and to Larry too. That's all from St. Louis, and seeing an exhibition by Julie Moose, I think is a photographer. I could be remembering her name, but I know the last name is Moos. And what she was doing was going around to the corn farms in St. Louis and taking images, because these are farmers who are growing for Monsanto. And the one of the farmers was like 6'4", and the corn was way taller than him. Whoa. So that was my first exposure to the seed issues, right? This quote unquote ownership of seed and land and farming and what they were doing to the farmers around them. So I guess all these years later, now that I learned from a pansy how to collect seeds, I guess that's my A capital way of I'll be sending seeds and similar to you, Anna, finding out a way that people can share their information when they actually grow that seed so that it re-heirlooms, or it stays an heirloom type seed. And then there's across the fence exchange of seeds. And I don't ask people to buy them. I mean, it's like the water. What am I going to charge for a seed? Like, you see how many are in there? I feel bad. I'm not going to charge someone. If I didn't like you, I would charge you.
That's totally fair. That is a good philosophy.
Can you tell shelf life for CMC, why you don't?
What?
Do you keep, how long do you keep that slip for with the CMC? Does the CMC go bad? Do you have issues with it? Do you only small batches at a time?
Is that what is in the glaze? The 1-spot glaze? Okay.
It like loses potency over time. But I have, if you like make your slip, and like seal it up really, really well, it'll actually, I have some that'll last years. But after a while, it kind of like it'll get a little crusty and then I'll add water and then it'll just kind of like flop back into liquid. Like it doesn't stay.
And that's with CMC.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's after years. I have had pretty good luck with I'm just trying to wash this out because I want to try a different color. I had to do it on the floor because there's like a little concave on the table here. But the floor fixed it quick. We're all good. Yeah, so and you can add CMC to a like pre-mixed underglaze. I mix my own underglazes because I can determine how much colorant goes into it. And the more, so then I have to use less, because there's a very fine amount that actually ends up, like through all the processing, the, right, it loses, what's the word? Clarity, but it's not clarity.
Opacity.
Yeah. There's
That's
another word, it'll
makes
come into my head like as soon as I walk out of here. Well, right, yeah, because like through all the translations, it loses some of its substance. And so by the time it gets through the screen and onto that, and then again onto the, I need like a lot of material or a lot of like the color that's going to make it that way. So I make my own underglazes and I just like increase the amount of the colorant that I'm using. So yeah.
What else do you mix it with?
My underglaze. Let's see. It's a really simple recipe. It's like a little EPK, or it's like borate or Gillespie borate. I think it's Frit 311.
Oh, you put a little Frit in there.
I can't remember which Frit it is. It's one of the Frits. And the colorant. And so I can make it a little bit, like it would be way too, for painting, it would be way too rich as far as colorant goes. But for screen printing, it works. But I have found that these clays are also really opaque. So that's why I can use the slip. Like I only have to use a teeny tiny bit to get like a full coverage. Yeah. I'm gonna try printing with this other color too.
Is that one or these two?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. What do you use CMC gum for? You said it's in the slip?
We took, pink Pinot Claire and made a once fire glaze with it, sort of slow fire sear recipes.
Okay.
And in order for it to go on,
The raw clay.
basically the or raw clay.
And it works?
We use a combination of CMC and what else? I can't remember.
And was that to increase the viscosity?
V-gum,
Vegan.
Oh, vegan.
Vegan.
I think they're the same thing.
They were
Or they're
two
maybe,
different brands, is it
Yeah.
like sodium silicate and
Yeah.
Garvin.
two different.
Put those set up a little bit. Make a few freehand.
so I just flooded it and.
What do you do about all the wrinkles written on it? Is it just correct now? Can you put it on?
Yeah. It does. Does and does. Okay, let me give it a try.
Yeah, 1% vegan and 1% CMC.
I wonder who that is.
People ain't mask.
So. I got like. So I can pass these around too. This one's a little bit more liquidy. But this one's like great. This viscosity is super good. This is from the top of the hill and this is from the bottom of the hill.
The top of the hill is lighter, right?
Yeah. No, top of the hill's darker. It's got more red. I don't know why.
Because the opposite is true of when you're talking about a categorization of a clay body.
Wait, when you're talking about what?
Categorizing clay bodies from porcelain, stoneware to porcelain, stoneware.
Right. And I think it has to do with the fact that it,
It's not actually.
yeah, it's because it's the glacier deposited. Okay, I forgot to bring it with me. I was going to show you, but one of the coolest things about working with Andy, who's that geologist that I met, was he explained the varves. So they're called varves, but basically every layer that has a color is a varve. And that is 1 year's worth of deposition, glacially speaking. So, and they're like in a lot of the core samples that they take from the lake, they're dark light, dark light, dark light. And the lighter colors have more calcium in them, which I think is a summer deposition. It has to do something with like the temperature of the water and what can suspend or not suspend. And so essentially what happens is the glacier like moves and deposits this stuff. And then every year you can see, it's like the rings of a tree trunk vary. So you could like see the span of a human lifetime, like in these bars.
So now make strip tiles, strip pieces, which are like remnants. So like I mentioned, even though I make pots, they're not repeatable. It's the same with the tiles, even though these are all things that come in like a bolt or a series, you know, if we're thinking about William Morris, right, and wallpaper. Those only had a certain run, right? So I just, first of all, trying to maintain a practice while you're working and teaching is really difficult. Right? So I just gave up on doing that and embraced the fact that remnants are important. And when you see that in museums, that's what you're seeing them preserve. So I just go with the idea of what's on the end of the bolt. Oh, and the other part of that is affirmed by, imagine your main labor source of picking and cultivating cotton. It disappears, but when it comes back, you can't even touch it. And you're lucky if you get leftovers to use it to make a quilt. So, so I'll just reposition the remnant as the, making, it's that form of adaptation and having limited resources, yet making beautiful quilts, which is.
The green?
No, it's yellow. Yellow and yeah.
Hey, Sean, can you talk to me if you're turning that thing on again?
Which, oh, the torch? Yeah, I just put it over here, so. Go ahead.
It might have fallen out.
In my car. But once I get some of these made, I'll go grab it really quickly, because you do need to see one of the main sources of quilts that I look at, and then I can explain sort of where that conceptual part came in with the quilts. And also what allowed me to work between utilitarian and non-utilitarian, non-functional, however you want to describe it, is that quilts have that same duality. They can hang on a wall and be viewed. I went to the International Quilt Museum while I was in Lincoln, Nebraska. There were some that were made with this sort of three-dimensional tumbling block mold. It looked like they're so heavy they couldn't hang them on the wall, so they were exhibited, on a plinth. But they're still a quilt. They can be an heirloom, and all you're doing is preserving it, but it's an heirloom quilt. But if any need happened, all of those things can keep you warm and actually have a basic utilitarian function. So you get the best of both. So I just use the sheet to lengthen them and give them different shapes and surfaces.
Yeah, this is the, what would Julia Child have done with a torch?
And I'm creme brulee. Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about when she, when she like pulls it out of the oven. I don't have any pre-baked things.
She taught someone once who was starting a cooking show, and they called her and said, I burnt it and something. She said, oh, just put a lot of lemons on it. And the person was like, that was the best advice she ever gave me. Because she explained how that took all the burnt off. The lemons cover up, I guess, a multitude of culinary sins.
Don't you wish you could just squeeze some lemons on your crap?
Yes.
Yeah, I just did that to speed up my process.
So sometimes I do leave them thick, depending on what I might feel like doing in the studio, or why I would be making them that thick. Sometimes it always depends on what I read, what I looked at last. So maybe I'll do that with this one, leave it chunky. And I don't, there are sometimes I do use the canvas to show through, but I'm not like a big fan. So I use high thread count sheets to smooth them out. I don't think I did that one. I have to go get the book. I'll be right back. Is that okay? I didn't put it over yet. I'll go look and see if it's near where my coat is, in case I took it out and put it on the desk. Just back. Oh, man.
So I do really want chocolate right now.
Where did Chotsani go?
She's grabbing the book.
Must be really lonely.
Star of the show.
Yeah. No, the pressure.
So do you have your own light table for making your own screens?
I used to actually, but I don't have enough space for it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and I don't use it often enough to justify it. So I have the friends of mine who taught me how to print in the first place, who had the baby who were here earlier. I actually gave them my light table in exchange for they make my screens for me when I need them. Because they're printmakers. So that yeah, it's a pretty good trade.
That's a bummer. I specifically picked it up. It's Gladys Marie Fry's book. Not in here.
Very frustrating.
When you do a project like the boats where you've had so many different prints, how long does it take you to redo the screen and then print one little boat and then redo the screen and then print?
I can gang print them, so I can like, and thank goodness for Photoshop, I can just import all of the images and then create a really like full. So like these, you can see, I'm like trying to maximize my paper space, so I just kind of like put them all in together, and I will almost always make duplicates. So like those boats, I'm sure that there were a bunch of duplicates in there.
Oh,
But yeah, I mean, it's quite a process to like coat and make a screen. And I used to also like I used to rent space from a studio that had a screen printer next door, and he would let me use his screen printing facility. And I invested in like, I don't know, I probably have like 10 screens, but like I said, like I have this one now because I gave all of my stuff to Laura and John. And it like they're storing it for me. They use it. It's like it's theirs, but then when I need it, they make me a screen, which is a pretty sweet deal.
so that one looks like it only has one image on it. Is that right?
That's right. And actually they made this screen for me specifically for this project. So this one is from, let's see, when was this is pre-pandemic. The show, this was, 18 to 19 was the project, that I did this. So those are a little bit older. And actually what I'm playing with now is a format that's a little bit different. For each cup, I think instead of having it wrap around the cup, I'm gonna have just one, like a little block section of it. And then I'm gonna be doing some animal drawings that are gonna essentially be on the other side, so that it will have sort of like a story and then a part of the ecosystem that I'm referencing, essentially. Yeah.
Are you gonna carve each animal, or are you gonna have something made where you can do many, make a stamp, like linoleum or?
Yeah, good question. I will probably draw and screen print. And then one of the really amazing things about you know, once you have a screen, like I could print using that screen, I could print 100 print.
The animal will be a screen.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. And then I'll just print like a whole block of them. And then I have stacks of prints that this doesn't go bad. These, like, once I have it on the paper, I can use it at any point, like years later. So
They don't
just
split
watching.
off at all.
right. I know.
I'm watching both of these things happen here, you know, this dimensional, and that might be neat to have dimensional animals.
Oh, well, see, that's what so if I print it on, I should have, actually, I think I can do this with one of the prints that I have, because this has some moisture in it still. But you can actually, yeah, push, so I could print the print and then push the dimension into it, which is really kind of fun.
This clay does not make very nice handles, so I'm debating about whether or not I should actually do this for posterity's sake. I think we're just gonna go with that for right now.
So yeah, and then if there's some space that doesn't work, I just cut the tile down and find the pattern. Benefit of going to art school and taking painting class and learning about mid-century painters not painting on stretched canvas. So the first day I came in, I didn't know what to do. I transferred into art school, and my professor was like, "You just tack it to the wall and you start painting." And I was like, "All right," she says, "and then when we stretch it, we'll find the painting." Okay.
How did that work?
Pat Lipsky Sutton. Oh, it was great. Except at the same time, I was taking printmaking, right? So then that's ordered. So those were two professors that had very different approaches. So it was good for me because I heard both of those things. Oh, well, there you go. I guess it's stuck. I make pots and then I don't. I make a tile, then I find the fabric after. And no, there's no plan. These could all go into any kind of iteration of a quilt. So it's just like, that is the part I embrace about the quilting and, maybe like the crazy quilt, if you will. But even the quilts that have patterns, you can still use whatever fabric to still articulate the pattern. So two things can be happening.
So I think maybe when you refer to quilting, you're referring to the tiles that you're making on the wall. And do you quilt with fabric as well?
Yeah, but I've never finished one.
Okay.
Because then you got to get to the timeliness of clay, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but they kind of get me started, and how I can mix things together and sort of what they look like. So it's almost like a form of stretching. I don't think I've used this a lot. This one, I don't really grab this one. So that's why I decided to grab it. And I'm just reflecting it. And then being okay with the fact that's back to student, well, this is getting in the way. And I always try to explain how that's really good because it makes it look like you really know how to do stuff. You know what I mean? The things they take care of themselves, and then people think you were all like up in the layers and stuff. And you weren't. And that's what I mean about the clay. It really, if you let it, it'll help you.
I'm check, it's like 5:05, just so you know.
What does that mean?
We're theoretically scheduled to go to 5:30, but
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to let you know, time flies when you're
It does.
demonstrating things.
It's like, it's the zone. What is the paper that you use for that print? What's the paper?
Gumpy.
Gompy? That's all.
It's a root fiber. That is super strong. And so therefore it can be made really thinly. But then also when it gets wet, it stretches because the fibers are longer than like other paper fibers.
Gompy.
Yeah.
So when you get the wrinkles out, it doesn't like smear the letters.
Say it again.
When you're spreading out the wrinkled paper, the letters aren't like smearing out.
Ideally not. I'm having a really hard time seeing the print
Same
because
color,
it's
yeah.
the same color.
Yeah.
So I'm trusting my process here. So I'm using just a damp sponge. Not a wet. And I'm kind of relying on the moisture that's in the clay to also help pack it.
So if I'm stamping the text and it's really, really soft, afterwards, I'm gonna do like an overlay. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I would have waited for this to set up a lot more and stamp, so it didn't impress so much.
What do you
And-
mean, an overlay?
Oh, I'll just, when it's bisque, I'll just do a brush and go over, so all the color is around it. So the word is the clay color and then just pops from whatever's around it. And it might hit the tip of some of those things, which adds to it. And I'm okay with like text in my work. I know that's another thing, you know, in art school or in visual arts, text is like an issue. But for me, having these made in India, right? That's all part of those craft traditions. These have somebody else's hands in them from that tradition as well. And then the words are meaningful in the sense of like my association with cotton, you know, T for tuki and matu. And then silk, because I lived in Benares, and Banarsi silk was like what every young woman would want for their wedding dress to be made of. And then the interesting intersection of that is that Muslims would make it for Hindus, right? So there's this. I lived in a Muslim neighborhood when I was there, and they made all of the stuff for the Hindu festivals. And then there were some instances it's vice versa. You just got out I mean, it's the holy city of Hinduism as well. But then you go out, you know, to where Modi is and Gujarat and Ahmedabad. That's where that riot violence broke in 2012. And so now he's the brother or prime minister. So complicated, you just move over a little bit and it's not the same.
So when I do this in my studio, I usually like do this in batches where I'll like make all the cups, make all the prints, have a stack of cups, have a stack of prints, and I just like, you know, I'll get into a rhythm. So I'm like totally overthinking this right now. So we should show the camera the big reveal. So you can see it gets this like super precise print. All of this. See, this is what happens when you overwork it. The paper starts coming apart.
And if you leave it, it doesn't burn out the impression. It will just burn.
So my experience, I want to try it with clay rather than with the ink, the cobalt. I find that it re-adheres itself to the paper. And so then when you fire it, it burns the paper and the print off. Or at least you don't get the crisp print that you think you're going to get. But I don't know if the same thing would happen with the clay as the ink. You know what I mean? Wow, that's like really thick. That wasn't quite as sexy as the usual reveal. That's exactly what it's like. When it dries, there will be more of a distinct difference between the two.
And so that I can expand on, you know, because I can't just go back to India whenever I want. And also, I don't even know how much longer block printing will be that available. When I would go to pick up my stuff at the block printer shop, he would always want to introduce me to his son who was going to college. he wasn't like very proud of the son. I'm like, that's not who I want to talk to. I talk to the son you sent to go get me my 12th Sprite of the day. I had to stop. I had to start learning how to pretend to drink things. Soda is like the main libation. So he was going to get me soda to drink. And that's who I wanted to talk to, you know, but you could tell right then and there, the same kind of influence from the West is starting to impact these like class structures and systems, and where craft can and can't exist and carry on for this, the not so equal replacement, but these are 3D printed. So I'll write and I'll use a vector program, and then I'll print these stamps out for newer text or designs and shapes that I've done. So I'm learning how to let those things coexist, you know. I thought I had other, I think they're in my other bin. They're in the bottom there somewhere. Okay, so now I'll start putting some color on my tiles and doing some brushwork. So the nice thing about this too is you can pick a side. You know how sometimes when you work with a tile, you give up one side. Here, I don't have to. I can see what this looks like, put this back on, pull this one away, and then kind of see how this edge reads for me. And I'm okay with the offness of the oval too. I do not need them to be perfectly oval. I'm okay with some shape being there. Oh, see, so I'm gonna go with this because already I got this little edge that I want. So then I try to see if I can kind of replicate it on the other side, and I just skim over that and then try to work that side. I don't think I'm gonna get it. You kind of know after a bit, but that's still a bonus for me. And that's what I was talking about last time. That helps me understand sometimes if I have to be away for a few days and I come back to them, they're almost like little notes about what I would design on here or what I would use it for. See if you get some of my brushes. And then I'll open my bottles. Yeah. You gave me so many colors, sure.
It's all out.
You need this banding wheel? No. You want a higher banding wheel?
No, good. I'm just experimenting. So this cup is much wetter, and I'm pushing, like I'm following the centipede that's on here, to give it some volume.
Did you say centipede?
Yeah. Actually, I think it might be a millipede.
You mean a literal millipede is in there?
Well, a drawing.
Oh, a drawing. Okay. You were talking about getting it out the earth, and I'm like exoskeletons.
I mean, I did find some of those.
I don't like those. So now I'm just luxuriating in my mind about my garden and making up flowers. Is how I start these.
Inside your pieces that have resin, is that a combination of your paper clay flowers and some real dried flowers?
I've only done that a few times where I put a paper clay flower inside of it.
Yeah.
Because usually I need those pieces for like other things. So I couldn't spare them for a while, but one time I did put one in. But usually it's reserved just for the flowers.
Yeah.
And then the shape around it is a paper clay form.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is it'll be an open form. It'll get fired open. It'll get glazed open. But then when I go to make it, I'll put it on like wax paper. And then I'll do a quick layer of 1 minute epoxy around the edge to make a barrier. So then I can just put epoxy in because it's temporarily glued. And that's how I get some of them to be transparent all the way through.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll make them. And when I put them in the kiln, I put them on a bed of silica sand. Then this glass that I have from graduate school, I hammer that down, put it inside of there, and then it makes that sanded background.
Yeah.
So that when you're looking through, you're seeing like sand, which is like the return to where it was for clear, which was in the ground.
Yeah.
So with the sand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when people think you come up with concepts, sometimes they're just like things
There.
that nature tells you. If you just follow the clues and you say it out loud, you sound profound. But I can't take credit for it. That's why I had to say, I had to correct. I can't take credit for it. I would like to, but
Do it anyways.
no, because then people would be drinking Kool-Aid. You don't want that.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
I think when you had one of the resin pieces up, you kind of alluded to like freezing time. And I was wondering more about like your relationship with that and relationship to the material choice of resin, how much it, like, are you referencing glass? Is it more out of necessity? Like,
I told my mother not to call.
We all say hi, Mom.
It's on Do Not Disturb. If she's on there.
Anna, do you pinch that?
Yeah, pension foil.
Oh, I'll wait till you're done.
Hi, Chotsani.
Oh, I saw you in a slide presentation.
This is the time marking.
So, I taught I had to, on the fly, teach a sculpture class where I taught, you had to teach it for us, I had to come up with another class.
Well,
So I was teaching sculpture, and then they wanted me to do a sculpture too.
Mhm.
And so I was learning all these things and the digitals, and this other center for innovation. And so I had the 3D printing, laser cutting, and then I stumbled upon Reynolds Materials. And because I was in Greenville, Charlotte was only about 90 minutes away. So I called up and I said, I'd like to get these things. And the guy on the phone was so nice. He says, yeah, I'll come down and do demos. It's like, I don't think we have the money for that. He's like, no, it's free. So I don't think we have the money for that. Like I said it like an East Coaster. I was like saying it 8 different ways, you're not getting paid. And he 8 different ways said you don't have to pay. So he came down, brought all these materials, brought a casting of Angelina Jolie's face.
That he did.
Well, his boss did at an event because she somehow, they did all, the Reynolds does movies. And so they're now trying to readjust their market because the movie scene moved to Atlanta out of Charlotte. So they had to you know what I mean? So really they were retooling to get to schools. But the problem is they can't go to schools where the children are where it's children under 18, right?
Oh.
So they're hitting like colleges, so I guess this was one of their ways. When he started showing these materials, that's when it all started. I found out that Cap's Okay is that clear stuff they use in retail to hold flowers in place to make it look like it's water, but it's not.
What's it called?
And Cap's Okay. Yeah. And then all these epoxies and resins and combos that can set up in different times. That's where all of that stuff started clicking together.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't know the moment though that I knew it would be embedded. I had all these big round things laying around for forever. And it wasn't until I saw that I said, oh, and there was a lot of trial and error in that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of spills and then I learned how to make sure, like plaster casting, that I was getting my volume right.
Yeah.
So that's why I always order trial sizes so that I'm not having a bunch that I'm putting back into the environment, but all of that's getting used in the work before the expiration date.
Yeah.
Before it doesn't catalyze anymore. So Reynolds Materials and what that can do is it expands the media like a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. The piece with the resin in the center from the mirror, that is CAD modeled, 3D printed, smoothed, then a platinum silicone mold made, and then I just make it in reverse. And then I just use digital calipers to measure the opening so that it fits. Because I'm not doing it. That's what you would do. Should have everything figured out to the absolute precise.
Did you say digital calipers?
Mhm.
So is it actually, like, does it off of a photograph or like, what is that?
Calipers that are digital. So
Oh,
the-
okay, so it gives you like a super precise
Yes.
digital readout. Got it, okay.
Not in fractions. In decimals, so that it can match Tinkercad. It's like cat
Cool.
for babies. But I am proud to use it.
Well,
Yeah, that is how I did the hexagon plates, because geometry is a thing.
It is. It's a hard thing.
And if you get it like a degree off, then you get like it just sort of, when they tessellate in degrees of multiples, right? So off.
were those cast?
Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing about, and I did the same, I used latex. I think, I'm trying to remember. There was, I CNC routed the original, so that I would get the exact geometry of the hexagon. Hexagons are challenging. They are like really complex math. Turns out the bees like are really good at that.
So did someone write a program for the CNC cutting?
Yes, yep. But at this point, you can also just pull programs, like there's like, you can ask the internet and it will provide.
Oh.
But see, I like to just give myself credit to say, I know how to ask. You have to know how to ask to give you the right information.
That's true, you gotta have the right. What is it called? Keyword, query, yeah.
So I let time go in between, so to build up layers and using the brush and different kinds of movements. And then if I were doing this on bisque, I would have been putting it in lots of layers, and then I'd take away with sort of scraping, and then I'll put a wash on top of that, kind of scrape away again so that I'm getting some variation. This is what's hard to get away from. Once I have all this stuff done and then I'm sitting here doing this, I could do that for a really long time. What's your daughter's name?
Ada.
Ada?
Yep.
Ada!
Ada.
Ada.
Ada. She is the star. Ada Lillian Lark. That's her full name. Yeah. The band name, you thought.
No.
Just putting fur.
We're a couple minutes out, like 5:30. How are
Okay,
you all?
I'm gonna open my,
I could be here until 4:30 tomorrow doing fur, so I'm happy to stop whenever.
Yeah, no, 4:30 seems a little untenable, but I mean, keep hitting it till we're
This is where you need like the stop motion version. Yeah, so the NRRI folks, the Natural Resources Research Institute, one of the mammalogist who I interviewed for this, what his specialty was or is the pine marten, which is different from a fisher, and they're in the weasel family, and they're really so the primary food source of the pine marten is a vole. And there's some really interesting correlations between their survival voles and snowpack, because essentially, if there is not enough snow, or if there is too warm of a winter, or the snow isn't the right, like usually what happens is they get a big snowfall, and then there's kind of like a layer on top of it. And the voles actually burrow in a certain kind of snow that then the pine marten hunts through these little tunnels underneath the snowpack, basically. But when that doesn't happen in a season, it essentially like kills off a whole generation of voles and then therefore pine martens. And so like winters like this, they'll do a species count and all of a sudden like nobody survives because there's not the snow and the snowpack. It has to do with like insulation and the ability to stay warm and find. So it's like all these species thrive and it has very specific conditions in order to make that possible. So he was like really encouraged over the last couple of years by the resurgence of the vole and then therefore the pine marten population. But I chatted with him the last time I was up in Duluth and he was like, I don't want to talk.
Aw.
He was really discouraged.
Yeah, this mold is sort of at its end, where I've taken it out a couple times, you know, once you start seeing that, that's like. So yeah, so for something that was this amber glass, so this is glaze, right? The contents were sodium hydroxide, right? Mixed in with a little bit of sodium, which is bleach and lye. Those are the
chloride.
Thank you, because you did chemistry for some. So which one is bleach? Sodium,
Hypochlorite,
and then lye is sodium
hydroxide.
sodium hydroxide. So there's a little bit of lye in the bleach to stabilize it, right? Usually in household bleach.
That's beyond my.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this functions in a couple of ways that those sodiums are sodium, you know, we have a lot of sodium-based glazes, right? So there's a chemistry connection. Then the bleach is like if you use the clean up blood, I don't know. I watch those shows. Yeah, but then I do the true ones, right? But you know, that's that luminol when you shine a light on something, which I think is what I'm doing when I look back. I'm trying to like find something in dark places. When you put that luminol light on cleaned up blood, what the light reacts to is the oxygen that's in the blood that doesn't go anywhere when you've cleaned it with the bleach. So then the blood responds and that's why you can see it. So there's that, which is oxidation firing that responds to chemicals that are going to give you the bright colors that you don't get in a reduction firing. And then lye is, and then I remember being in my aunt's house and there were chitlins in the sink and they were cleaning them. And then I was like, why is there bleach? Oh yeah, you put the bleach in the chitlins and we're going to have some later. I was like, yeah, I'll have some later. Yeah, I was like 6. You did not need to tell me about eating a food that you needed to put bleach in to clean. Like my black card was on the line for that. My aunts did give me a little bit of, you're not gonna have no chitlins? So then that's, you know, and putting a little bit of bleach in your dishwashing water, and then this idea of bleach, even as we were during the pandemic, right? Trying to find these replacements for like Lysol spray or sanitizer, right?
Tequila, you know.
Then we put like, this is toxic, you can't ingest it. But we do when we put things in our body like a vaccine, right? So it's all about these things that are invisible, that are attacking things that are invisible inside of us, right? And then all of that invisible is in this bottle. But then when you go into a bathroom and you smell bleach, somebody's man in the station. Someone came in and cleaned. So it makes me feel a certain level of kind of like, oh, it's been sanitized, like someone's cleaning in the bathroom. And then lye, you know, we have that in our soap. It's another way of cleansing, but it can be awfully caustic. It's something that I put in my hair for years, getting relaxers, which now women are suing relaxing companies because there's like cancer is some associations with cancer, you know, so just these tensions, right? Of these materials that are toxic in my own practice with clay. We have OSHA. We have practice a bunch of OSHA, which really makes people mad when you have to say no, and it's for their health. But they can't see that, right? It's not immediate. So yeah, and then these bottles, I still think I paid $12 for them. I think this one was probably 12 or something.
You know how it was made? Cast or like a blow mold maybe?
Yeah, because well, you can see when it stopped. This one, there's the mold where they pulled it, right? When they're sort of like learning it. But here, these are the later ones, kind of almost just before plastic. Because you see it echoes the plastic one that you get, that's the quart size. This is closer to the end of glass being used. And it's also got the screw top cap, whereas in this one is the quart.
Yeah.
So then I'm doing that's industrialization, right? And I'm working in clay. Then I'm encouraging other young people to work in clay while the whole world is plastic. Then people come up in here. Well, you know, so but then everyone says we got to do something, but everyone's buying Magnolia at Target. No disrespect if you buy something at Magnolia Target. I have a pair of sheets that were on sale. Right? We're in the machine. I'm not trying to pull someone out, but people have sometimes a disconnection of where they're purchasing something. Then when they get angry about, like when they hear about something bad really happen, those things are kind of closer than we think. So then we need luminol. Because they're cleaning stuff with bleach, man. Even till today, remember I said that, you know, slavery is just transformed. And we have the whole industry of, oh my gosh, I'm getting really depressing. It's Saturday. I only get dystopic on Wednesdays.
As a rule.
Well, it's like a way to like check it so that
Yeah.
like I don't ruin the rest of the week.
Taco Tuesday.
It's like
Taco Tuesday, Tabber Tuesday is what my home is. Dystopic Wednesday.
Yeah, you know, you just gotta be careful.
T-shirts, right?
I don't need to repeat what we all already kind of what's out there. So it's back to the hope and despair, you know. But the first thing they do want to cut is the ceramics course. Isn't it true?
But ceramics is the new yoga.
Put that in the course book.
I know, but then when they find out they have to make clay, it's a little un-yoga. Right?
I guess.
Yeah. There are some de-yogaing moments. If you're gonna like get into it.
Okay.
Is it? I mean, wedging sounds yoga. But it's it's not yoga. But I know what you mean. It's like yoga if like paint by numbers yoga. You do paint by numbers. You could do paint by like paint your own pottery.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like it's more like, you know, sort of getting in touch with the lost part of oneself. Yoga, you know, sort of opened up a generation of people who like were kind of re-exploring certain movement practices and
So
mindfulness.
mindset.
Yeah.
Mindset.
Yeah. And clay, I feel like, is doing a similar thing for, you know, people who aren't connected to dirt, basically.
But then there's the Lululemon factor of yoga.
And there's that in clay too. New clay.
I guess that's what I was thinking more.
Yeah.
Well,
Not that there's anything wrong with going to Lululemon.
thank you for clarifying that before we start rounding this out. We don't want to get sued, you know, now. Well, I think we are at 5:40. Thank you both so much for this incredible series of lectures and demonstrations. Much like Chotsani mentioned, ceramic artist waiting until the last minute. I did have to go run snacks and stuff off my cubicle wall, so I didn't forget. Anyone who's interested, you can find more information about Anna and Chotsani on our website. That is northernplaycenter.org, along with information about the programs they are both associated with right now. That is our McKnight Fellowship. We offer 2 of those every year. And the portal for applications for that is opening on Friday, March 15th, and the application deadline for that is Friday, May 17th. All applications to Northern Play Center are free, so I would always encourage everybody to apply, regardless of your feelings about like possibility of getting something. The only thing you have to spend is time. And I would always really encourage anyone who's even remotely interested to please do that. And we also, as of January 26th, our portal open for early career artist in residency opportunities. These are year-long residencies that are for emerging artists, early career artists. That portal will be closing on March 31st, 5 p.m. Again, anyone here who has students, anyone who are young artists in their lives that feel like they need a year to sort of explore some work, suss some stuff out, this is a really great opportunity. And I would highly encourage you to have them apply. Any questions, please reach out to me. That's Sean Lofton at northernplaycenter.org. You can find me on the website. And thank you both again. This has been
Thank you, everybody.
phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah. And I will just shout out again to Sean and the Northern Clay Center crew. Also because I happen to know that you all do a lot of work to try and help people get their applications in. And I just, I can't say enough about how awesome that is. And anytime, I always tell people just apply. I mean, just do it and then do it again and again and again and again.
Yeah, realistically, we just change dates, you know, it's because the jury changes every year. So
I think this was my at least 12th time applying. So there you have it.
well, thank you everyone, and thank you all for coming, and have a great night and a good rest of your weekend.